The great castle was perched on a cliff, surrounded by demons. Footsteps could be heard within the walls of this castle. The door opened with a loud creak. The demon welcomed Lyle Carmine to its abode. Lyle held up his greatsword, and so they met. Standing in front of Lyle was the demon lord himself, Dean Nosferatu. The master looked at Lyle. He thought about it. I examined the man, and he looked, in Vladika's opinion, too unsightly to be called a hero. Only his sword in his hands was decent looking. Once Lyle was determined enough to face him. Then the bishop is obliged to answer him accordingly, and she sneers at him, calling Lyle a despicable mutt of the Holy Land Church and telling him to look at himself because he's shaking all over. He doesn't even dare call himself a hero. Lyle looked at the master in surprise. Dean Nosferatu noticed that Lyle wasn't holding the sword properly, and his stance is lousy. Lyle probably really thinks that in this state, he can crush the abnegated demon lord. Lyle said nothing. The master said that in that case, let the hero attack him. He will feel the full power of the Nosferatu Dean on his skin. Lyle's hands trembled. Vladika wonders if Lyle has chickened out. Lyle's whole body trembled as he tried to speak. He threw the sword away viciously, sending everything to hell. Lyle bowed wearily. It's the circus that annoys him. He doesn't understand why this farce was played out. Lyle tells his lord to stop all this. Tears welled up on her face. Lyle didn't want to kill him. Vladika looked at him sadly. I sighed, telling him to stop whining. He needs to pick up his sword and continue to stick to the script. Vladika spoke his name. Lyle said it. After all, they have already decided everything. The Church of the Holy Land Project. As a prefect, he will kill the root of evil with his own hands. He is called both Vampire Lord and Immortal Sorcerer, and Dean Nosferatu. Lyle doesn't understand where he is the Vampire Lord. After all, he had never drunk blood in his life. This is some kind of posturing with the Demon Lord, a necessary act to make it realistic. Vladika asks him to be quiet. He's never called himself a vampire at all. However, he cannot deny that he is a different being from ordinary people. He has no idea when he was born. I didn't notice how I wandered around the world already in this form. His blood contains magical energy hundreds of times greater than that of a human, and all because it is able to absorb the energy that exists around. Because of this, he does not age or get sick. There was a ruined house. Vladika had different cones on the table, and there was a stick lying near the pedestal. Dean Nosferatu stared thoughtfully at the magic in his hand. He was experimenting with his blood, which was overflowing with magical energy. Children watched him from the window. Witnesses of this ritual called him the vampire. People thought he was doing something to his blood. They were terrified of it, and they decided that they needed to drive it out, drive the monster away from their village. They swarmed over the vampire's house. He was scared. The men were armed with pitchforks and torches. He spent about 50 years on the run, chased from everywhere like a monster. The vampire was running away from evil people and wandered. He didn't remember a moment of calm. Evil people wanted to kill him, and he had to leave this place. And then he found the lock. When I went inside, I didn't notice anything alive. I was thinking of settling here, but he was worried about what the villagers nearby would say. Residents said that this castle has been empty for quite a long time without a master, and if he wants to settle down, then no one will mind. It remains only to bring the castle in the proper form. And he was ready. The vampire was glad of his new home. The carefree villagers easily accepted him. The kids were spying on him, and I noticed it. He let them in, teaching them various subjects. He helped children when they didn't understand. The villagers made a chair for Dean. He gladly accepted the gift. Since then, he has spent 150 years in peace and quiet. The villagers prayed to him. At one point, he even became something of a guardian angel of the village. Lyle insisted that his lord had done nothing wrong. He's their guardian angel, their ageless parent, a family member and teacher. Lyle wanted to know why he would kill the master. But Dean was tired of whining and being hysterical, and it's time for him to stop, because he is the village chief and the father of the child. Lyle started talking about Thedef mark disease. If the epidemic hadn't started, they wouldn't have gotten this far. It was a year ago, in the capital. There was an illness. Dark marks covered the entire body. Whatever they did, the fever didn't subside. The young man was paying attention to the crowd. They have nothing to fear. You have to believe in them, the Church of the Holy Land. Unwavering faith is necessary to cure the disease. And he calls the people to repent of their sins, and then the darkness will recede. You need to drink holy water. The disease will immediately go away. The streets were filled with the bodies of dead people. According to reports, the intensity of infection with the disease is not decreasing. On the contrary, more and more residents of various lands are experiencing high temperatures. The number of deceased patients exceeded 1,000. The bodies are no longer buried. The prefect cursed. There were a lot of questions: what is happening, why nothing helps, and what was the cause of this disease. The young man has another report. Only in the village of Farah, located in the remote mountains and lands, no deaths were recorded. Vladika looked at the infected hand and thought about it. He confirmed that it was the death mark plague that had engulfed the capital. Residents are surprised. The headman had heard that a huge number of people had already died from this disease in the capital, and he is afraid that the same thing will happen in their village. Vladika asks you not to worry. He has already experienced epidemics several times in the past and knows how to deal with them. However, this is the first time you have to deal with something like this. He instructed the villagers to refrain from contacting people from the capital, but you can't isolate them from all the refugees and messengers. And he commands to deliver to his castle all those who are suspected of infection. Since his body is not susceptible to diseases, he will personally look after them. Vladika speaks to the people. Such epidemics spread through the air. They need to be vigilant. Even if a small temperature has risen, this may mean the possibility of infection, and you need to wash your hands properly. He made a respirator out of Lanimal's herbs. It has the property of purifying the air. You need to wear it all the time without taking it off. At the same time, changing to a new one once a day. They turned to Vladika. It was Lyle. He came to tell me about his daughter, Ellis. Dean looked at him sadly. He was walking down the corridor of his castle. He opened the door and entered the room. Vladika decided to find out how Alice was feeling, but the girl could barely get the words out. He reassured her that everything was fine and she wasn't going to die. The girl smiled. Her condition is much worse than that of other infected people. We need to do something faster. Dean looked sad. He told her that all the people of Fair Village were precious to him. He considers them his family. Each time, it becomes unbearable for him to face the death of someone in a long life of 200 years. And when she threatens a member of your family, especially, mystical blood can be used as a catalyst for magic and includes the power of purification. He will give her his blood. Thus, he managed to save the village from the invasion of the ailment of the death marks. The residents of another village arrived at Farah Village. They were received by Headman Lyle. After listening to him, the other headman was finally convinced. In this village lurks a monster called the Vampire Lord. Lyle doesn't know if he's talking about the same monster. There are records from a couple of hundred years ago about repeated reports of its detection. He is called the Vampire Lord, or the Abnegated Demon Lord, a creature that sucks human blood and skillfully manipulates magic. It was a terrifying monster, but they were lucky to have discovered it at this very moment. Lyle doesn't know what he means. Now, the source of the disease terrorizing humanity has become known. This is all the result of the Demon Lord's machinations. But Lyle thinks it's crazy. These people are from the Holy Land Church. Word is spreading everywhere that their lord is responsible for the Deathmark Plague. Dean reads that the entire territory of the village of Fair is under the influence of his dark magic, so she was able to avoid the invasion of a deadly disease. This is an interesting theory. Lyle told them about their lord, but they suggested that if he wanted to dispel the charges, he should take the holy sword and kill Dean Nosferatu, and thus prove the innocence of the entire village. This is the royal decree. Lyle asks to tell the lord. He wants to know what he thinks about solving the problem, like the Deathmark case. Vladika asks him. Lyle needs to kill him. Lyle can't believe it. The lord says that based on this decree, it can be assumed that they have taken the entire village hostage, and he wants to protect her as much as Lyle does. He tapped Lyle on the shoulder. He needs to defeat the Vampire Lord and earn the trust of this church, and asks not to disappoint the headman. Lyle doesn't want to be the one to kill his lord. Lyle thought of his daughter. He wonders what to say to her. His daughter keeps saying that she will be his bride. The lord thinks she's still very young, and when she grows up, Lyle will personally choose a human mate for her. Lyle begs her lord to escape. Dean looked at him sadly. They'll fool the church themselves somehow, and even if it doesn't work out, and they try to follow the lord, they are ready to fight to delay. They completely monopolized powerful artifacts and knowledge of ancient magic, making them an extremely strong military organization. And with this power, they even bent the nobles with the royal families of different kingdoms to their will. Dean's no match for them either. Lyle is going to stand up to these guys, putting the whole village in a position of persecution. Lyle has nothing to say. Dean says he'll have to suck it up and finish him off. Time is running out. The bat twitched as it heard the loud sounds of footsteps. The door opens loudly. They came for the abdicated demon lord, Dean Nosferatu. They, the paladins of the Holy Land Church, had come to punish him. Lyle swore under his breath. We need to do it right now. Dean calls them the stupid people of the church. They seriously think they can defeat the great Dean Nosferatu, and he started toward Lyle. Lyle turned his head. Lyle's sword pierced Dean Nosferatu. Lyle's eyes were frozen in horror. His lord was seriously injured. Dean whispered in his ear that it was surprisingly painful. He hadn't lived such a bad life. I didn't have any children of my own, but I created a semblance of a family, and that's enough. That's how far he went for them. He doesn't want all his efforts to be wasted, and he hopes Lyle understands. Lyle tearfully replied in the affirmative. Dean put a hand on his shoulder and pulled away from the man. Dean says he's a real hero. It hurts like hell. He believes that he only did not grow old, but was not truly immortal. He glanced at Lyle. Lyle wasn't finished yet. Dean looks at him, telling him to stop standing there like a statue. Lyle has to say something. Lyle gritted his teeth, and he said, calling Dean an evil wizard. He raised the holy sword up. He announced triumphantly that the master had been smitten by him. The village chief, Lyle Carmine. People were proud of Lyle. Dean fell to the floor. People called Lyle good. Here the role of Dean ended, and now he has something to do. His familiar, the bat, was here. Vladika knew that this would be the end of it, and took action. He will overpower his soul from this body into a bat. Dean's face fell to the floor. It was bad. He hadn't expected his strength to drain so quickly. He cannot transmigrate his soul. He reaches for the bat. It looked like his plan had failed. His hand dropped dead. He couldn't hide properly, which made him the target of a huge organization. And that's how it ended. Failure, no other way. He should have gotten to know people better before he came to this conclusion. Then Lyle and the others wouldn't have been involved. Dean's eyes closed. A voice rang out, offering to go through the process of rebirth. Dean is surprised. He could hear snatches of what the voice was saying. He was talking about who he could be reborn into. Dean thought he was imagining the voice, but the voice continued to speak, inviting him to be reborn into this world. Dean thought of Lyle, the way he leaned over his body, sobbing. Din Nosferatu answered with his head, if possible. The consent was confirmed, and the voice gradually began to fade. He will be reborn as a human. Lyle lowered his gaze. He looked back at his lord. He lay motionless on the floor. I'll see them again. Dean wondered if he'd managed to say the last words out loud or not. Lyle jerked his head, and it seemed to Vladika that Lyle nodded at them. How it really was, he was not destined to find out. He saw his hands reaching towards the sky. He was reborn as a human being, and he suddenly remembered his 10th birthday. The voice asked if Dean wanted to be reborn in this world, and he was reborn as a man. He was looking at his hands. He was curious to know what that voice was. Dean got out of bed and continued to stare at his hands. It's been 3 years since Dean Nosferatu's memory came back to him. Finally, he got used to the difference between his past and present memories. He lived in this body for 13 years. In the past, about 200. I have already accepted this fact. He is the vampire lord Dean Nosferatu, and also the second son of the baronial family, Yuki Grosseria. Dean thought about it. After dying at the hands of Kyle, he must move his soul to a familiar, a bat. To do this, he gave her his blood and imbued her with magical energy. I also prepared a special spell and suffered a huge fiasco. In fact, this was his first audition. He had never died before. Failure was inevitable. More importantly, after he managed to move his soul, that mysterious voice was heard. After that, consciousness passed out, and now he was reborn as a human. He opened the window with a creak. He looked off into the distance. He wants to know who reincarnated him, and how much time has passed since then. This is a baronial domain. They are quite far from the capital, the so-called hinterland. The grocery barony consists of him, the bastard of the current head, Jorg Grocery, the father who adopted him into the family, the crown's son, the elder brother of Zero's, and Rumia's younger sister. Including him, there are only 4 people in the family. Since he was not born of a legitimate wife, he has no right to inherit the title of nobility. Therefore, he will need to decide what to do next. Enroll in one of the educational institutions or become an adventurer. But before that, it is necessary to get to know humanity better. In his previous life, he hadn't managed to skillfully blend into human society. While settling down in the castle, he was chased by everyone like a monster. Only then did he turn into the guardian angel of the village. And this is the outcome that was prepared. At the moment, he's not exactly human after all. Abilities from the previous life have been preserved. The mystical blood still flows in my veins. So sooner or later, his time will stop again. And when that happens, he will have to pretend to be an ordinary person. While a child, he will thoroughly study what people are like. And when he stops aging again, he will use the knowledge he has gained and skillfully hide in the shadow of human society. He will use magic for this purpose. He could hear noises in his room. I saw a bat that must have come from the direction of the mountains. But for some reason, bats were always attached to him. Because of this, in fact, they called him the Vampire Lord. Dean picked up the blade from the table. He turned to the bat to see if it would like to help with a magical experiment. He shows his hand. He cut his finger on it. Blood oozed from the wound. And he tells the bat that this blood is called mystical blood because it is full of magical energy. If you drink it, the bat will become his servant, gain strength and intelligence. The bat licked his finger. Dean was delighted. The bat's eyes widened. She started jumping up and down to greet Dean, and she thanked him for his strength. Thanks to his blood, she can now speak, and it will certainly serve a good purpose, but Dean himself has recently acquired this power, so he relies on it. By giving someone his magic blood, he was able to turn them into servants, but he can't do it without consent. And even if you turn him into a servant, you don't get full control over him. This relationship is more likely to sound like this. He will give magic energy. In return, the latter must fulfill his request. A bat can immediately help and tell you if it knows a suitable place to experiment with magic. And the bat thinks about the mountains where it lives. But do not forget to be careful, there are monsters there. Namely, a black bear, a night bird, and a large rabbit. Dean didn't think that would be a problem. They'll go into the mountains tonight, and Dean hopes the bat will guide him. The bat will be waiting. There was a knock on the door. Sister Rumia came in. She wanted to say that the food was ready, so she decided to say it instead of Martha. She came running from the main building of the mansion again, although her older brother had already told her that. Rumia wanted to listen to her brother's progress for a bit on the way to the cafeteria, and he began to tell me that in the morning he woke up and had breakfast. I read the books needed to enter the commoner's school. After that, I was going to ask my father to teach me how to use the sword, but he was already busy with zeros. After lunch, he swung a wooden sword by himself. Rumia stared at her brother with her small eyes, and she said that he should pay more attention to a girl's feelings. Yuki thought she was angry, but Rumia said that wasn't true. He held out his hand to his sister, as if offering her company on the way to the dining room. Rumia glanced at her hand, and I put mine in there. The street rattled. Yuki thought about how strong the draft was. Rumia said that part of it was still standing before the father built the main mansion, and I thought to myself how I could fix it with magic. He hopes that the Lindbull Guild has something, and that his brother is going to join it. Yuki started thinking about the Lindbull Magic Guild, a huge organization that includes a magic academy and a research institute. The guild consists of members of the royal family and the highest nobility. So pushing your offspring, there is a demonstration of high status in noble society. It also looks like the guild member will be trained in powerful ancient magic. This is a very interesting topic for Yuki. The ancient magic reminds him of the Church of the Holy Land, so he doesn't really want to get involved. Yuki withdrew into himself. Then he only heard what Rumia was saying to him. I apologized to her for not listening to her. She, as usual, fixes what she has learned. She will read out what she learned today, and her brother should listen. I asked her to take a deep breath. Yuki has been helping with Rumia's training and retelling a passage of a poem for quite some time now. This is a special lesson for honing the pronunciation needed to activate magic. The poem hasn't changed since his previous life, so he can keep an eye on Rumia. He remembers his past life. After all, he also taught the village kids. And the throne room in which he died was not a throne room at all, but a classroom for studying. That's how I worked for 120 years as a teacher. And I didn't notice how literacy in the village became 100%. Rumia and little brother came down the stairs. Yuki announced that time was up. He will go to the dining room of the far building, and she stays here, but Rumia wants to eat with her dear brother. He can't eat here. Rumia herself knows. And I heard Rumia being told not to be selfish. The man says that knowing your place is important for someone who is connected with magic. This man's name is Cockle Maijin, the tutor that father hired so that Big Brother Zeros could enter the Magic Guild. Rumia looked at Mentor Cockle and Brother Zeros in fright. Cockle turned to Yuka. Maybe he doesn't know, but people aren't born equal. But Yuki knows, and he says that above all is humanity, below that are other humanoid races like the elves. And at the very bottom are monsters like leeches and vampires, for example. Cockle looked at Yuki thoughtfully and asks him about the balance of power in the noble family. Yuki glanced at him, and I started looking at the glossary family. And most of all, the head of the family has the power of the father. The next legal spouse is Matishka, then the older brother, Zeros, and Lady Rumia. And below all of them, he is Yuki Grosseria. Cockle said he made one mistake. A bastard like him has no right to be called the surname of the noble Grosseria family. Yuki offers his deepest apologies. Rumia tells her mentor not to say that. Yuki is her older brother and part of the Grosseria family. Mentor Cockle looked at her. Then he turned to Zeros. He turns the arrows to his brother, even though he's already an adult. The tutor said that he had already instructed him what the heir of a noble family should be, or Zeros had already forgotten. Rumia says that a bastard is like a servant, but it is not proper for a nobleman to share the dining table with the servants as a person who stands above others. Zeros must preserve the pride of an aristocrat. The mentor said that these were the words of their elder brother. Rumia looked at her older brother in horror. Yuki touched her and sent her off to eat. He would still be too nervous if he ended up at the table with the others. Differences in social status. As always, people love such nonsense. Therefore, it is better to have a quiet meal with Martha in a remote building. Rumia looked at Yuki. I accepted his wishes. Mentor Cockle, Zeros, and Rumia left for the cafeteria. Yuki thought about it, and he asked permission to ask Mentor Cockle something. He wanted to talk about the Holy Land Church. It is interesting to know how much time has passed since they discovered the capital of the ancient magical civilization Elysium, overflowing with ancient magic with artifacts. The mentor was angry. Yuki is not allowed to say the name of this Elysium Temple Church out loud. This is taboo. Yuki looked at his mentor. Cockle tried to catch his breath. However, it will answer Yuki's question. This year will be 220 years since the discovery of the capital of the ancient magical civilization Elysium. Yuki should know that the mentor answered him out of mercy, so that Yuki doesn't start pestering someone else with his insulting question. And the mentor left. Yuki thought of that church. It seems that the world in which the newly made papadannets awoke is still fraught with quite a few secrets. Yuki put down his fork and knife with a clink, thanking him for the meal. It was very tasty, and he would have liked a larger portion. The maid replied that they were leftovers from the main building's table. She will clean up the table, and Yuki can rest for a while after the meal. This maid's name is Martha. She lives in a remote part of the mansion and takes care of Yuki. Outside the window, Yuki noticed two figures. It was Rumia and Badiasiga. Rumia holds out her hands and recites a spell, addressing the light of the incarnation, asks you to answer her call and shine, and a flash occurs. My father patted Rumia. He complimented her on how well she managed to recite her spell. This is their father, Jorg Grosseria. She trained a lot, and her diligence is commendable. Rumia says she has something that deserves even more praise. Now the priest will demonstrate how it is necessary. As Yuki can see, Rumia's efforts are paying off. Jorg has a big bright ball in his hand. Rumia admires her father's abilities. Yuki thought that the spell's verse and effect hadn't changed at all since his previous life. The spells didn't evolve, but they didn't decline either. Yuki recalled his mentor's words that the capital of an ancient magical civilization was discovered 220 years ago. He wonders if it's really been 200 years since Dean died. It turns out, apparently, that 220 years have passed since the Church of the Holy Land Elysium discovered and took possession of ancient magic artifacts, and Dean was killed 20 years after that event. In that case, 200 years have passed since his death. So Lyle and Alice had already left this world, and he sighed sadly. There was nothing he could do about it. But he still finds it hard to believe. The name of the country has changed, but the grammar of magic and the social system of society have remained the same. So he thought that he was reborn in a closer generation to his previous life. True, ancient magic has remained an art for the elite, and is available only to the highest strata of society. That's why the tutor who owns it, Cockle, can act so arrogant. And the older brother wants to get into the magic guild. Yuki stared at the ceiling. He is interested to know what has happened in these 200 years. He's going to find out. The Elysium Temple Church has disappeared from the scene and is now branded as taboo. Yuki wants to know how it happened, because I don't want to cross paths with them again. Speaking of which, there's a library in the main building of the mansion, so maybe he can find some information. But a bastard can't cross the threshold of the main building without permission. For penetration, you will need to come up with a plan. And to do this, he first needs to experiment with his skills. And I thought about the delicious meat so that my mouth watered. As usual, there was nothing meat on the dinner table today. So he'll hunt along with some magic experiments. But first you need to test these skills. He looked up his status. It usually masks it with these characteristics. After all, when he enters school, he will be tested, as he was told. Yuki looked at his status again. Only it was already real. His skills include flight, mystical blood, presence blocking, ice magic, minion creation, interspecies dialogue, erosion, and purification. This set of skills should be enough for him. Evening came. Yuki pushes his foot away from the window and jumps out. A skill that temporarily completely nullifies his body weight with magic. I jumped up a tree. The guards didn't notice him. It seems that blocking presence is also working properly. He thinks he should be back in the morning. It bounces off the branch and flies on. A bat was waiting for him there. Yuki thought that the bat would guide him to a place where he could practice magic and hunt animals in one go. For a bat, this will not be difficult at all. But first, the bat would like to know the master's name. But she didn't have a name. She asked the landlord to name her. Yuki pondered. I thought about the name Dick. The bat liked the name. That was the name of the father of an old friend of Yuki's. As he lay dying on his bed, Dick thanked him that he had lived a happy life and wished that Yuki would listen to his last request. He was talking about his son, Lyle, who would need to be taken care of. Dick, the bat, asked how young the master was. Yuki asked him not to worry about nothing, but rather to talk about who they were going to hunt. Their target is a large rabbit. Big rabbits are very cautious creatures. Yuki already knew about this. If he remembers correctly, horns and a kick with his hind legs should be avoided. Anyone knows that. And anyway, he doesn't intend to meet in close combat. After all, he said that he was going to conduct experiments with magic. Dick said the flames and wind would be too noisy. Yuki specializes in something else. His magic is ice magic, and he used freeze. The ice bindings swiftly headed towards the big rabbit. The ice touched the rabbit's paw. Its magic is perfect for creating traps and stealth activities. It makes no noise and doesn't glow when used, so it can easily catch unsuspecting prey and completely immobilize it. Yuki is happy with his result. He came down from the tree. He drew his sword, and he apologized to the big rabbit, and killed him. Yuki hung up the body to let the blood flow out. Yuki felt Dick's eyes on him. Dick admired his master's ability that even he could not escape such magic. This is a very low-key magic. Dick goes on to say that it creates neither light nor sound. The victim will not notice how he will be trapped. It's the best magic you can think of for survival in the forest. But it's still no match for ancient magic. Yuka had seen the church officials use it before. In his previous life, he had watched. The priest easily dispatched the two thieves. They even begged for mercy. The priest did not listen to them. A flash appeared in front of them, and these people experienced such excruciating pain. It was an unacceptable thing for a priest to do. They, the servants of the Temple of Elysium, should not turn a blind eye to the atrocities of violators of order. Then the priest burned the entire band of robbers to ashes with a single blow. Usually, magic is embodied by casting a spell, using the magical energy inside the person as fuel. Yuki has simplified his ice magic, but he still can't use it continuously. At the same time, the Ancient One lacks all the limitations of simple magic. A truly merciless group with a force imprisoned under the threat of battle. Yuki immediately realized that fighting the church was pointless. If Yuki had powerful magic, then Lyle wouldn't have had to kill him. In the current generation, ancient magic is in the hands of the Magic Guild. Just look at Cockle to see that he doesn't want to get involved with these organizations. Dick turned to his master. His friends, the bats, discovered another large rabbit. Yuki is surprised that Dick has friends. When Dick told them all about his master, there was no shortage of people who wanted to serve him. The sound of wings flapping appeared overhead. Yuki raised his head. The night sky was filled with bats. Dick wanted everyone to know how great his master was. Dick's companions know all about this mountain. It can be considered that this land became Yuki's domain. Yuki praised Dick. Dick is honored to receive the master's praise. It seems that all the information about this mountain has fallen into his hands. Just in time, he uses it as his base. Yuki asked Dick to choose some of his companions as messengers to contact him. When monsters that are too strong for you appear, or you are suddenly attacked, let Yuki be notified immediately, and he will immediately jump to the rescue. The bats were all thanking Yuki in unison, so we decided, for now, he needs to go to the next big rabbit. Yuki, test your skills. He was able to apply all his skills. Using them, he will continue to pretend to be a human by all means. After catching a few more individuals, they will return home. This loot will be the key to his plan to infiltrate the main body of the mansion. The gate creaked open. Behind him, Yuki could hear what he was doing. It was Cockle's mentor. Most likely, he was following Yuki, just as he had planned. As the mentor himself can see, he went hunting, and Yuki points at the rabbit. He set up traps in the forest, and one of them caught prey, so I brought it home, and he plans to have the maid of the far building cut him up. It's just that you don't often get to taste meat, so I decided to share a little. The mentor holds his head and thinks about the selfishness of this bastard, and he explains that a bastard in a noble family is equal to a servant. If the servant has caught the prey in the hunt, then it is obliged to hand it over to his master. and Yuki dares to use these offerings to win the favor of other servants. The mentor says how unfortunate it is. Yuki doesn't care what her mentor says. He would like to cut up the meat sooner, so he has to leave it. His mentor stops him. Yuki turns to him. The priest heard some screams. The priest was glad to meet his son. Yuki tells him that he used to hunt in the mountains. Mentor Kako intervenes and tells Jorg that Yuki is going to claim his loot. Jorg looked at his mentor questioningly and wondered what nonsense he was talking about. If Yuki was hunting, then so was his prey. The priest saw that his son had caught a large rabbit and 2 carcasses at once. Father praises Yuki and ruffles his hair. Catching such careful prey is commendable. What a Yuki father has for a gifted child. Yuki thanked his father. My father received a noble title for his military services. He still does not stop training and does not skimp on praise for the achievements of others. In his past lives, Yuki didn't have anyone he could call father, so he really likes this person. The priest tells him not to take any more chances. There are many dangerous monsters in the mountains. The mentor gets in again and says that such a condescending attitude is unacceptable. Yuki turned to him. Instead of scolding the bastard for being disrespectful, Jorg dares to praise him. This is unworthy behavior of a true noble. The priest asks the mentor not to be so strict. His child was successful in hunting. He doesn't see anything wrong with praising him. But it seems that my father has forgotten the terms of hiring a mentor. He would do his best to get his heir, Zeros, into the Lindbull Magic Guild. In return, his lordship will not contradict the preceptor's teachings. It seems that this was the agreement. My father wanted to object. The tutor decided that he was going back to the capital at once. Yuki says he is wrong, and he was not sufficiently aware of the importance of his position and discipline in the family, and asks to accept this offering from Yuki. Yuki gives the rabbit to father, but in return, he wants to get permission to visit the library. My father asked me again if he really wanted to do this. Yuki says that the mentor is absolutely right. They must deepen their understanding of their situation. To do this, he wants to fill in the lack of knowledge. My father is surprised at how seriously he takes this. Yuki thought to himself that this farce was set up by him. He knew full well that if he returned to the mansion through the central gate, his mentor would pick on him, and it would probably be hysterical for his voice to reach the priest, who is usually engaged in morning training at this time. It wasn't difficult for him to make this plan. The priest is happy to give his permission to Yuka. The mentor himself heard everything, and he probably won't have any objections. Kako barely uttered the word no. He doesn't have any objections at all. Yuki's plan was successful. Yuki noticed. The mentor left the office. Yuki laughed maliciously as he passed by. Yuki thought that he had forgotten this way, since there was only a library here. Neil, the butler, was standing in front of him. He was expecting Yuki. He has served in this house for a very long time. My father said that he fought alongside him in his youth, and Yuki asked the butler what the mentor was doing here. The butler wasn't interested in what the tutor was doing. The butler asked him what book he was looking for. There were few books. Now it is an expensive luxury object. Yuki was looking for a book on the history of this country, and I found it. The butler is surprised at what he can see from here, Yuki said roughly. After all, in the old calligraphy style, only small letters say, "History of the Kingdom." Yuki tried to open it, but it didn't work, and he was puzzled. Yuki said it wouldn't open. The butler had already unlocked the bookshelf, and yet it doesn't open. The butler glanced at the bottom of the shelf, and Yuki too. It was locked with a magic tool. Yuki realized that this was the master's doing. The butler took his leave. He swore allegiance to this baronial house. He must have thought that he would put his father at a disadvantage if he didn't obey Kako. Yuki thought about how hard it was to deal with these people after all, especially with the nobility. He doesn't understand these people, and he wonders if his mentor was sorry to waste a valuable magic tool just to keep him from reading a book, and accepted it. He drew his dagger and cut their finger. He will try to use spell removal, which he hasn't used in a while. By soaking the tool with blood, it can use its power to interfere with the embedded spell. This works on the same principle as in the case when he gave Alice his blood, and with the help of purification, destroyed the virus ailments of death marks, penetration of the outer layers of the magic formula, and further immersion of hacking. Analysis of the spell's inner layer is complete. Magic attachment spell formula detected, and starts breaking the spell's performance. Spell deactivation succeeded. The mentor's lock fell. Yuki thinks that it will be necessary to return it to its place later. The butler came with a tray. He was offering Yuki a cup of tea. I noticed that he was reading a book. Yuki refuses, doesn't want to get the book dirty. The butler was taken aback. He looked at the lock. Yuki made a mistake. I put the magic tool upside down. And all because I was in a hurry when I put it back in its place. Yuki glanced at the butler. Neil said that even a tutor might make a mistake that way. In the past, on the battlefield, he had been captured by such a seal, and it is so powerful that to remove it, you had to resort to the help of 3 wizards at once. Of course, it is impossible to remove it alone. Therefore, the mentor probably made a mistake when applying it. Yuki chuckled. The butler probably meant that the mentor wanted to annoy Yuki. Neil apologized for the slip-up. The reverend tutor wouldn't stoop so low. Yuki continued reading. An hour passed, and Yuki slammed the book shut. The Church of the Holy Land, which calls itself the Temple of Elysium, discovered the capital of the ancient magical civilization Elysium and declared it a holy land. Using ancient magic and artifacts, she has earned herself an unshakable position with political influence in society, and now destroyed, finally and irrevocably. Yuki didn't understand how a church with such terrifying power could collapse. This was due to the intervention of the church in the territorial war of the kingdoms. Within the organization, there was a split into several factions. Each of them enlisted the support of the kings of different countries and pushed them to start a war. They probably thought that they would easily win with ancient magic and artifacts in their hands. However, once this war started, the ancient artifacts were rendered useless, and it was not even clear whether they simply did not start or completely lost their power. However, it was too late to retreat, and the kingdom was already plunged into the abyss of a long war. And when this horror was over, all the hatred of mankind turned to the Church of the Holy Land. The complete destruction of the Temple of Elysium, which had become the enemy of all mankind, did not take much time. At the same time, most of the ancient artifacts that they possessed were lost. Yuki lay down on the bed. He thought that by this time, humanity had long ago made copies of the artifacts and secured a more comfortable life. For example, one turn of the valve to let hot water out of the tap, or a blanket warming during sleep. The organization that once managed to unearth that holy sword is now completely extinct. It's not even funny. As a result, they caused more harm to the world than the immortal sorcerer. He couldn't find anything about the village of Feyre. The history book only tells of the destruction of the Temple of Elysium and the founding of the Lindble Magic Guild, which inherited ancient magic and does everything possible to ensure that it falls into the right hands and the terrible mistakes of the past will not be repeated. He remembered Leal's daughter. To get more information, he needs to go to the capital. The capital has a grand library, and there must be plenty of scholars studying history, too. Perhaps there he could find out what had happened to Feyre Village, Lyle, and the others back then. And he thinks about his future actions. He can choose 2 paths. The first is to leave home and enter the Academy for Commoners. He can't inherit the family's noble title, so entering the capital's academy as a commoner and gaining the necessary knowledge of this world is a perfectly acceptable option. Then it will be your turn to become an adventurer and go on an eternal journey, without stopping in one place, so that no one knows where you came from and how much you are traveling. That way, not a single soul would suspect his immortality. The second way is to go to the lands where the village of Feyre was located. The war began shortly after his death. If he could find Alice's descendants, he might be able to get some information about the fate of the village. Yuki continued to think. He'll do it all together. If you think carefully, there is no reason to limit yourself to one option. Then you need to talk to your father. Congratulations can be heard from the street. Yuki looked out. He saw a red carriage, probably a stagecoach. Father noticed Yuki he was just in time, and he needs to go down to them. Zero's received a very honorable message. Father wants Yuki to hear her. Yuki looked at them questioningly. The mentor tells Yuka that he should be proud to have such an outstanding older brother. Yuki is surprised. It's the first time he's seen Cockle with such a good mood. Father asks Yuki about the Lindble Magic Guild. From this very magic guild, there came some exciting news for Master Zeros. My father was also happy. Yuki already thought that his older brother had been accepted into the Magic Guild, but alas, no. Her Royal Highness, the 8th Princess Iris Rashia, will come to see Zeros in person. Yuki continues to be surprised. Her Highness will be studying at the Magic Guild. Yuki listened carefully to Zeros, and he said that this is an organization that includes members of the upper class. Then it turns out that Her Highness the Princess will come as a representative of this guild to see her brother's abilities. Zeros is a little surprised that Yuki guessed so quickly. Cockle was already buzzing around with his venomous sarcasm. Yuki thought that Her Highness was coming here for some Baron. Mentor Cockle began to praise that this result was the fruit of his efforts. He didn't write letters of recommendation for nothing. Of course, any effort would have been in vain if Lord Zeros hadn't had such a talent for magic. To become a guild member and master, and then control ancient magic, you need high magical abilities. Her Royal Highness, the 8th Princess, has very high abilities and has already been recognized as a member of the guild. And this time, she personally volunteered to act as an examiner. Ziz says this is an exceptional case. This shows how highly Mr. Zero's abilities were ranked in the guild. Cockle, I will look at the smiling father. The mentor cleared his throat, and he said that during the stay of Her Highness Princess Yuki should not leave the house. Yuki looked at him questioningly. Cockle explains that it would be ignorant to bring out a dirty bastard in front of Her Highness, and he asks you not to leave the far building a single step. Close all the windows and hide, without making a sound. Cockle laughed maliciously. The priest and Zeros were amazed, but Cockle asked his lordship to be quiet for a moment. The mentor put a hand on Zero's shoulder, and invites Zeros to tell Yuka everything himself. The mentor begins to manipulate Zeros, telling him whether Zeros can master all the secrets of human magic, unable to point out his place to his younger bastard brother, or else he wishes to introduce him to Her Highness, telling her that this was his younger brother, a bastard, and that they were equals. Zeros considered. Zeros took a step toward Yuka. Yuki glanced at his older brother. The older brother has the blue eyes of a legitimate wife and the golden hair of a priest. My brother looks a lot like him. That's why Yuki can't possibly hate his older brother Zeros. Zeros turns to Yuki, telling him that Her Highness has the royal blood of this state in her veins, and a bastard like him is not allowed to show himself in front of such a noble person. Cockle wants Zeros to make himself clear and say what he thinks of him. Zeros squeezed his hand, and he began to say that he was a child that my father had made on the battlefield. He is a starved child of unknown origin. He wouldn't let such a mudblood show up in front of Her Highness. Yuki looked at his older brother in surprise. Zeros raised his voice to Yuki. Yuki should not leave the back building during the princess visit. Yuki smiled. He will be happy to do so. The two brothers looked at each other. Yuki repeats again. Yuki doesn't care about this princess. He didn't really want to get involved with this princess, or rather with the royal family. These guys like to push small change to adventurers, telling them that they need to destroy the demon lord. In his previous life, his castle was visited by one such pseudo-hero. While Dean Nosferatu was preparing something, someone stopped by. This person wanted to tell him to prepare for death, but he didn't finish as he fell. He fed her and explained that he was harmless. I think I even understood. After that, for some reason, she settled in the village, joining the ranks of the squad. It was Layla's grandmother. Yuki recalled his past life with nostalgia. Yuki decided that he should make his position clear. And you need to be calm, as you were punished on this day to close all the windows and do everything so that it is not discovered. The priest and Zeros looked at him in disbelief. If they were still worried, he could spend the entire day at the inn. And if the priest gives his permission, he is completely ready to go on a long journey. Jorg holds his head and apologizes. He understands that this is all to join the ranks of the highest aristocracy, but forcing his child to say such words is already too much. Zeros turns to Yuki. He just said not to show up on the day of the exam, and Yuki immediately said about moving to the city or going on a trip. Yuki seems to be mocking me. Yuki was horrified. That's not what he wanted to say. On the contrary, he tries to support them in every possible way. After all, in his previous life, he had dreamed of older relatives, so he doesn't want to be misunderstood, and he'll tell you straight out. He tells them that he's not interested in the princess or the magic guild in the least. Zeros was surprised. Yuka is satisfied with the ordinary life in a baronial family, and he's not going to jump over his head with the princess. He knows his place very well. When dealing with a person of such a high position as a princess, you probably need special etiquette skills that even your father has not heard of. Therefore, he absolutely does not want to embarrass himself in front of everyone by communicating with her, become the laughingstock of other aristocrats, so to speak. He doesn't really care about ancient magic either. The collapsed Church of the Holy Land personally demonstrated that nothing can be solved by force alone. Zeros gets angry. Therefore, Yuki asks that the three of us meet Her Highness with peace of mind. He wholeheartedly wants to be accepted into the guild so that they can study ancient magic. Now the older brother will understand that there is no need to worry. Zeros shouts at him. He was tired of being bullied by Yuki, and I came to the conclusion that Zeros jumps above his head, does not know his place, and will become a laughing stock for the aristocrats. Yuki probably means that he is making a pointless effort and that he is not worthy of joining a magic guild. Yuki doesn't understand why his older brother would think that. Zeros says Yuka should be grateful that he is allowed to live in their mansion, and he won't let you make a fool of yourself. The priest stops him and explains that Yuki didn't say this to humiliate him. Zeros is solved. He will demonstrate his strength to Yuka. My father looked at his older brother. Zeros wants to show how strong he has become. Use the ancient magic that his mentor taught him in front of Yuki. Jorg thought about it. Cockle asks his lordship to listen to his son's words. He glared at Yuki. The mentor thinks that Yuki just doesn't understand the value of ancient magic. Therefore, in order to prevent Yuki from uttering such nonsense in the presence of nobles in the future, it would be wise to personally demonstrate its power. Zeros also asks very much for the priest, and he agrees. He will personally test how strong Zeros is. Asks for wooden swords. Right now, he will have a training fight with Zeros. Yuki raises his hand. He'll go too. The priest tells him to stay put and watch them fight. He also forbids servants to approach, so that the ancient magic once again does not fall into the eyes of random witnesses. The mentor thanks him for his concern. He will judge this duel. The loser will be the one who drops the sword or admits defeat himself. Neither the priest nor Zeros had any objections. Cockle announces the start of the match. Zeros warns his father that he is attacking. Yuki thought about it. Zeros drew a symbol in the air, commanding incarnation. Cockle praises Zeros. Zeros activates the spell. He pushes off with his foot and attacks George, increasing his physical abilities. Yuki is surprised. Fright is visible in the priest's face. Yuki thinks that father is inferior in strength, but he deflects Zero's blow. With normal magic, you can increase your physical strength by a certain amount at most. Considering the difference in build and body size with the father, Yuki can assume that the physical strength of the older brother is currently increased several times. Father praises his son. He can't believe that this is the result of his training. Zeros shows his power to Yuka. Yuki thought of a power that couldn't even be understood, about the power with which he will raise the house of Groseria to the very top of society. At the moment, both in strength and speed surpasses the older brother. Badiosika is able to continue fighting without giving up, thanks to his rich combat experience. This explains why the Lindble Magic Guild keeps ancient magic under strict control within the organization. This is too powerful and terrifying a force to allow it to spread freely in the world. Yuki saw what ancient magic could be. And in general, neither the physical formula nor even the words of the spell are still incomprehensible. I couldn't make it out at all. All he could remember was the movement of his older brother's fingers, and he drew it on the palm of his hand. It seems to have activated. Yuki looked at it in horror. I didn't know what was going on. My limbs feel like they're on fire. It feels as if some force is emanating from the very depths of the body. It was as if he had returned to the body of the immortal sorcerer, Dinu Nosferatu, and he realized that it was dangerous for him to stay here. He interrupted their fight, and he began to run away, explaining that he felt bad. Zeros wanted to stop him. I ran after him, as he must see how strong Zeros is. Yuki didn't understand why his older brother chased after him. Right now, Yuki can't just let himself get caught, and only faster begins to run away. This did not leave Zeros unmindful. He can't catch up to Yuki, and he wonders why. Yuki thinks he's under physical enhancement right now, and he starts to worry. He pushes off with his foot on the ground. Zeros looks around the corner where Yuki has disappeared, but he was no longer there. Zeros is in a stupor. He wonders where he's gone. The window where Yuki was hiding was opened. Yuki stared at his palm, trying to catch his breath. He wondered why. Just by drawing a symbol in blood, the ancient magic was activated. He is overwhelmed with power. It was as if he had become an immortal sorcerer again. The mentor asked Zeros what had happened. Zeros couldn't catch up to Yuki, assuming that he was also using ancient magic. Cockle reassures him that this is impossible. To use ancient magic, you need to perform certain actions, read a spell, and even manipulate magical energy. Without guidance, the bastard can't do any of this. Zeros wants to object. The mentor says that Zeros himself only mastered the magic of physical enhancement. It was probably just him who couldn't handle her. With the proper use of amplification, he should be able to defeat even his lordship without any problems. Zeros squeezes his hand. He sometimes feels that he will never surpass Yuki. The mentor thinks that there is a need to have a thorough conversation about the fact that this bastard is not a match for him, and that he has great power. How they usually do it. Zeros agreed with his mentor. Yuki looked at them from the window. He exhaled. He almost got caught. He plopped down on the floor. He looked down at his hand again. He didn't expect that drawing this symbol on his hand was enough to activate ancient magic. In past lives, when he wanted to write something down, he would cut the tip of his finger and do it directly on the palm of his hand or nearby paper. Yuki remembers Lyle laughing at him, which is why they call him a vampire. It seems that the need to find out about ancient magic in earnest has surfaced. But before that, he has to do something. He went to see Martha and apologized for scaring her. Does he realize how scared she was when something flew through the window? although she immediately calmed down when she realized that it was Yuki. Yuki doesn't understand how it can be otherwise. After all, Martha, had sworn her loyalty to him. When her mother was forced to leave the mansion due to illness, it was he who begged his lordship to hire Martha instead. Thanks to him, they can continue to live a quiet life with their mother. Previously, Martha's mother was the only servant who looked after Yuki. Martha is also a childhood friend of Yuki and Rumiya. He just couldn't leave her mother to fend for herself. This was before Cockle came to the mansion, and the rules weren't as strict. Yuki worries if everything is too much for Martha. After all, they took care of him and drove him to live in a remote part of the mansion. Yuki visited Martha's mother more than once. He just can't stand being stuck in the mansion all the time, and he doesn't have any other acquaintances. And after each such visit, her mother felt better. For Yuuki, it was just a coincidence. Still, Martha's loyalty belongs to Yuka. Yuki thinks she's stubborn. Yuki had never once considered her a servant. It's not the first time Martha has heard this either. She lives with her sick mother, and Yuki is a hindrance to his brother and Cockle. Yuki's precious partner is needed to survive in this mansion. Martha slammed her fist down on Yuki continued to speak. Does it bother her that he flew up to the second floor? Martha had always known that he was an amazing person. Ever since she was a crybaby, Yuki had always protected her, chased away scary bugs with magic, cooled the burns when it was burned, and he always said to keep it a secret. Because of this, she grew into such a mysterious woman. This time they will do the same, keep the secret. Martha remembered something. Did he have anything else to say when he was spying on her while changing clothes? Yuki only said that he already knew that she was very beautiful. In gratitude, he will wash her hair. My father came in and announced that during the princess's visit, he would go to live in a hotel in the city. Yuki and Marta looked at Jorg. In general, there is no good reason to do this to him, as well as forcing them to hide in the room, not getting out anywhere. However, the instructions of a tutor sent directly from the Magic Guild cannot be ignored by the priest. Yuki doesn't mind at all. In addition, he himself suggested the option of a hotel. He hopes that Martha can be taken with him. In that case, he has nothing to complain about. The priest came closer to his son. He hugged me tightly and apologized. He said that he was just a commoner who had received a title, and that he wasn't qualified to be an aristocrat at all. He's sick of making his own son feel this way. Yuki says Marta is watching. Martha turned away from them, saying they could go on as long as they liked. Yuki was resigned. He always thought it was his duty to comfort the children. It turns out that it's not bad to be comforted, but only closely. In his previous life, he didn't have any parents. But now he has a father, a younger sister, and an older brother, and, of course, Martha. This is already enough to consider that it is not for nothing that I was reborn into a person. Yuki thanked his father. He'll be fine. The priest will give instructions that he should not experience any needs. Puts Martha in charge of taking care of Yuka. These words are enough for Yuki. Martha bowed. They can leave Mr. Yuka's care entirely to her. Yuki and Marta bowed to their father, and he left. Mentor Cockle asks Zeros about the fact that Yuki is bothering him. It was the truth. In this case, the mentor is forced to repeat that Yuki will never master the ancient magic. This magic is reserved for the chosen few. Zeros understands that. Cockle sighed. He can understand why Zeros is so wary of Yuki. Zeros had seen his lordship's behavior for himself. How worried he was about Mr. Yuka. It looked like the bastard had completely drugged him. This is indisputable proof that Yuki is trying to get rid of Zeros and take the place of the heir. Zeros was trying to say something, and the mentor pounced on him, so that he would not show weakness. Yuki gradually implements his dastardly plan to lure the servants to his side. He had personally seen Yuki plan to sell one of these prey items from the hunt. Obviously, he was trying to win favor with himself. Kako can't imagine what would have happened if he hadn't intervened in time. Zeros begins to think that his brother really wants to get rid of him. Kako explains that this is a common occurrence in aristocratic families. The bastard gradually ingratiates himself with the head of the house, and as a result takes the title of the rightful heir. Cockle simply has to demonstrate to everyone that he has great power. Zeros turn to his mentor. The mentor asks you to listen carefully. He is the only one on his side, Cockle Maijin. His only ally is his mentor. The dirty bastard only denigrates the Baron's glorious name and tries to take that title away from Zeros. The mentor fully believes his student, although it may not be mutually trustworthy, not having enough magic power. Zeros also fully trusts his mentor. Cockle smiled maliciously. He leaned toward his student. He should repeat the words after his mentor, clutching the amulet that he handed him. Yuki Grosseria is a common enemy that they must confront. Zeros took his amulet and repeated the words. Cockle thought to himself that no matter what Yuki did, he wouldn't be able to defeat his mentor with Lord Zeros. So Zeros can pass the exam with peace of mind. The butler turned to Mr. Yuka. He was just looking for it. He has a message for Yuke from his lordship. Her Royal Highness the Princess will arrive in 5 days. Therefore, the day before her arrival, the butler asks her to move to a city hotel. He will also be banned from heading to the nearby mountains starting at noon tomorrow, since they were selected as one of the candidates for the exam venue. Yuki won't be able to go there anymore, and he wanted to experiment a little with ancient magic there. But never mind, he'll sneak out of the mansion again at night. In the meantime, he will conduct all possible experiments in the room. His brother's ancient magic was activated after he drew a symbol in the air and cast a spell. Yuki had memorized the shape of the symbol from his brother's finger movements, but I didn't understand anything about the spell. It must have been some special language for ancient magic. Yuki only drew the symbol without saying the words of the spell. However, physical enhancement was activated, and he doesn't understand why. Yuki decided to go back to the basics. In this world, there are ordinary magic and ancient magic discovered by the Holy Land Church. The difference between them is 3 points power, duration, and required magic power. Ancient magic is incomparably superior to ordinary magic in everything. The older brother, simply using the physical reinforcement, was able to fight on a par with the father, a skilled and experienced warrior. After drawing a symbol like his brother's, Yuki's body also began to overflow with power. He is interested in the question of why the spell was activated. He picked up the parchment, so I decided to draw this symbol. After carefully examining it, I realized that nothing was happening. Now he will try to use his mystical blood as he did then. He moistens the tip of his pen with his own blood and draws a symbol. And the spell was activated. His body felt so light. Even the lifts and squats are awfully fast. Yuki thinks about jumping, and I changed my mind. The outcome is obvious. The duration of the action is about 10 minutes. As soon as the magic energy runs out, the symbol on the hand disappears. It is very comfortable. This way you can easily check the validity period. After drawing the symbol on the parchment, nothing happened. Where is there parchment to use physical reinforcement? So the reason is his mystical blood. He opened the status menu in front of him. In the skills tab, one item appeared in affinity for ancient magic. Yuki wonders what to make of this. He didn't have any affinity for ancient magic before. In fact, he had never used ancient magic in his previous life. Only in the end was they pierced once with an ancient artifact called the Holy Sword. Yuki thinks it might be because of that holy ball. His blood is like an extension of his limbs. When he died, the Holy Sword was covered in it. So you can say that at that moment they were connected, and after being reborn, being connected to an ancient artifact, he received the skill, Ancient Magic Location. This made Yuyuk very interested. After being reborn, he thought that the people of this generation had developed the progress of civilization by thoroughly studying ancient artifacts. However, due to the war, the ancient artifacts were lost, and the Lindable Magic Guild monopolized ancient magic. Yuki thinks about fully mastering the ancient magic, and then they will have the opportunity to independently promote progress and make life much more comfortable. Yuyuk stops fantasizing because it's impossible and unrealistic. In his previous life, he was a provincial demon lord, and in this life, he was the bastard of a baron. I don't intend to jump above my head. His desire is to know humanity and be able to lose himself in human society. And the development of the human world will leave it to these very people. He would hope that his older brother would be able to join the Magic Guild and become a big shot there. On the street, I could hear that someone was very happy. Rumiya and Marta are happy that they will be able to eat Yuki meat today. If they don't calm down now, then Cockle will come rushing in and be a nuisance. Yuki is fine as it is. He was reborn as a human and found an ordinary family. Even as a bastard in an aristocratic family, he lives in affluence. He would no longer be cursed as a demon lord by anyone. All he wanted to do was study magic, make life easier for the villagers, make sure that meat gets on the dinner table at least once a week. Yuki was falling into a gentle sleep, and he wanted his past life to leave him behind. Yuki had planned to sneak out at night, but it just so happened that he overslept. He ate too many delicious pancakes with sweet syrup for dinner and completely passed out. It can't be helped that the 13-year-old body needs a lot of healthy sleep, and he remembered that the mountain was going to be closed in the afternoon. Until then, he will experiment with ancient magic. Dick arrived. Yuki thanked him for coming. Dick says they were looking forward to his visit, and the others want to say hello to him, too. Yuki waved at them and asked Dick to send them back so as not to attract attention. Yuki thought about it, and he asked me to keep a lookout around the mountain while he conducted experiments. Now he can focus on them with peace of mind. Focus on the experiments he couldn't do in the house. Namely, double physical reinforcement. And now he wonders what will happen. He pushed off from the ground. He'll check it out now. Yuki quickly rushed forward. He was clearly surprised. Yuki was amazed at the speed. It was too fast. Even the scenery began to float. And all 5 senses can't keep up, and decides to climb above the trees. He flew up, and I experienced this feeling. It was as if his body had taken off, just like how he had flown in his previous life. And the action time is approximately 10 minutes. Yuki admired it. The older brother was drawing a sign in the air while reciting a spell. There's only one mouth, so only one spell can be read. It turns out that you can only physically use one ancient magic at a time. In Yuki's case, there are no restrictions on the number, since to activate ancient magic, it is enough to draw a sign with mystical blood. And I realized that it was bad, that he was a little excited, and I thought about what would happen if he drew 3 characters at once. And he tried it. He was in pain. It felt like he was being torn apart. His muscles ached and his fingers barely moved. It seems that the load was too much for a 13-year-old body. And after 10 minutes, the action ended, which Yuki was glad for. Dick asked about his host's condition. Yuki can't take a triple boost. I thought of drawing this symbol on the bat's body. Dick thought that sounded interesting. Yuki is a small and stupid child, filled with curiosity, so he drew a doodle on Dick. The symbol was ready. Dick looked at the symbol. Dick wasn't okay, and Yuki was going to erase the sign. But Dick stopped him, and Yuki didn't notice when Dick flew away. Dick was bursting with strength. If you don't focus, you can't see his movements at all. Yuki warned him to be careful not to hit a tree, but the bat's echolocation also increased. Dick wondered at his master's power. By the way, the ancient magic worked on other mice that are not his servants. Yuki thought that ancient magic was a scary thing, and the members of the Magic Guild masterfully wield such power. Don't mess with the Magic Guild and its members. Better in an ordinary educational institution tends to become an inconspicuous commoner. Magic is a hobby. It's dangerous to pry further, Yuki sighed. It's time for him to go home. If he was late for breakfast, Martha would be angry. Breakfast should include leftovers from yesterday's syrup. It goes well with black bread, so you can lick your fingers. On the dining table in the baronial family, such a delicacy rarely appears. It would be a sin to miss this. Dick tells the landlord that he has found a man. His comrades found him. The man was attacked by a monster. Yuki emotionlessly responded to this. He was attacked by a black bear. Yuki only said that he had entered the mountains without training, so it was the man's own fault. Probably some reckless traveler, and he has nothing to do with it. Dick didn't know why. Why does the host run as fast as Dick under boost? Yuki explains that this mountain is one of the potential areas for his brother's exam. He is afraid to imagine how the mentor will start brawling if this happens. Just thinking about it made my skin crawl. He was thinking what a doofus it was to climb dangerous mountains without training. The man tells the lady to save herself. The black bear is too much for her yet, but she wouldn't think of running away without him. The man complained about how that person could report that it was a completely safe mountain without a single monster. And I didn't give you a map. I gave you complete nonsense. Now is not the time to complain. First you need to get out of this danger. He will draw the monster to himself, and the lady will prepare a spell and attack the monster. His main opponent is this man. The girl began to chant a spell. He swung his axe. The lady was talking about Mother Earth. Asks to show them the breath of a fierce flame. And the lady asked me to step aside. She directed the force at the monster and made an ifrit punch. The black bear was burning. The monster was on edge. It remained to finish him off, and the monster fell to the ground. They were on the verge of death, and all because of the information of one stupid person. The lady made a sign to be quiet. It was the cry of a monster. The letter states that the security level of this zone is A. It is ideal for conducting an exam, and when they arrived here, they immediately encountered a black bear with a risk rating of C. They need to put this matter on hold, and for now, they need to get out of here as soon as possible. Grandpa calls the lady. The lady turns her head, and there were 2 more bears in front of her. The bear struck lightly, after which it flew straight into the tree. The lady screamed in pain, and I saw it. One bear goes straight for her, and the second for the grandfather. Her voice is gone, and she won't be able to recite the spell. The man began to worry about the lady. The black bear showed its claws. He was growling. The lady shook. The bear swung its punch. She still has a lot of things to do that she has to do. She closed her eyes, and there was no one in front of the bear. There are many ferocious monsters in these mountains. Without proper training, it is dangerous to wander through them. The lady opened her eyes. Then she saw a young man standing in front of her. He was holding her in his arms. The man was surprised. The lady couldn't believe that this boy had saved her. It was like physical enhancement. Yuki began to tell her that black bears were currently in mating season, and even he was trying to avoid their territories. In case of a collision, it is best to retreat immediately. But even with ancient magic, it's hard to believe that he could move so fast with her in his arms. So angry, it's too late to try to escape. Yuki said that there was no need to worry about him, and it would be better to help the old man. A flock of bats came to the rescue. They all pounced on the black bear. The black bear crouched down. The lady can't believe that ordinary bats attacked a black bear. It's a funny sight. Bats attack smoothly. Yuki will be doing the second one for now. I asked my mistress if she was able to use magic. She still has some magic power left. She would have to use that fire magic again. The first time, Yuki couldn't get a good look at her. Yuki will give her a signal when to use magic. The lady thought how fast this boy was. This speed can't be achieved with first-level ancient magic like physical enhancement, and I realized that now was not the time for that. She needed to focus on the spell. Yuki was distracting the bear. I jumped on top of him, and he pierced him with his sword. The lady noticed that the monster had stopped moving. Yuki applied instant freeze, and the black bear stopped. Mistress is surprised to see ordinary ice magic. The skin of a black bear is very tough, and is able to protect both from fire and from ice. So this boy pierced it and sent magic directly into the monster's body. Then the lady's magic isn't needed at all. The black bear is a very tenacious monster. Yuki tells her to give a finishing blow just in case, so that he could get a good look at the use of her ancient magic. The lady makes an ifrit kick. The bear melts into the fire. Yuki points out where else to direct the fire magic, and tells everyone to move away. My grandfather understood the decree, and the second bear was smitten. The lady plopped down wearily. I thought they'd pulled through somehow. She is immensely grateful to Yuka for saving her from mortal danger, and he also saw something extremely valuable. She didn't expect to find such a skilled craftsman in such a remote area, and he looks like he's about her age. My grandfather patted Yuka on the shoulder. The lady thought that Yuki would probably be taking the exam. She stared at him. Yuki thought that it was too similar for a simple coincidence. He was interested in this girl. She looks a lot like Alice. Yuki knew they weren't locals. The locals will never go into the territory of black bears. He wondered why the two of them had wandered so far. Grandfather asks you not to be angry with the lady. They were told that these areas were safe, and Yuki would like to know who told them that. And they said that the tutor was in the service of the baronial house of Grosseria. Cockle. Yuyuk started to sweat, and I thought that this idiot should have thought about it first before doing anything. Just a little more and the exam would have failed. The lady thinks that Yuke belongs to the house of Grosseria. Yuki is surprised by the question. He simply replied that he was an ordinary hunter, corrected that he was a regular hunter mage. The lady was a little upset. Still, he's a skilled hunter. With such skills, he will be accepted into the magic guild with open arms. And Yuki asked that they are somehow involved in this guild. He just assumed, according to her. And the lady decided to introduce herself. She's here to help with the magic guild exam, and her name is Clara. And this is her guardian body, Bunce. The magic guild entrance exam is scheduled to be held here in a few days, and they came to watch everything in advance, to avoid unnecessary danger or fraud, unknown to the lord of this land and his entourage. Of course, if they notify you in advance, there will be a lot of unnecessary noise. Clara thanks Yuki for saving them, and he wants to know the name, but Yuki would like to remain an ordinary nameless hunter. Clara replied that if it was their savior's wish. In this case, she asks to accept the gift as a token of gratitude. Yuki doesn't think that's necessary. The lady thought that hunters went about their business so that they could sell their prey for money. Yuki seems to have been caught, and he scratched his head. The black bear's entire carcass was charred, and Clara wants to make up for it, and puts a present on his hand. Yuki sighed. He thanked the lady. Clara was embarrassed. She thanks you again for saving me. If he hadn't jumped up in time, they would have been dead. Yuki started to speak. He thought of Lyle and his daughter, and he talks about it. Clara looked at him, and she's surprised that he already has grandchildren. Yuki asks not to pay attention. He will lead them to the foot of the mountain. That's where they left the carriage. Yuki already knows. The bats have already scouted. As a result, the young man, except for a hairpin, did not accept anything else, and they left in their carriage. Clara also thinks he's an outstanding young man. So young, already has so much power. The skill and bravery of taking down a monster with a single hit at a critical point is also admirable. The lady squeezed her hand. How she wished she had someone like that by her side. Accompany the lady everywhere as a knight. Everyone dreams about it. It's unfortunate that she can't tell him her real name. Grandfather also thinks that the savior was treated badly, but he is sure that they will soon have such an opportunity. He must be Zero's Grosseria, a young man who aspires to join a magic guild. The lady has her doubts. The report of Cockle's tutor indicates that this young man is an intelligent young man with blonde hair and blue eyes. But today they have learned from their own experience that there is no faith in the words of this fool. But Cockle's father was a worthy man. Anyway, she thinks that Kid is Zero's, and even if he makes a mistake, it turns out that Cockle missed such a talent. It would be a good excuse to kick him out of the guild. May he be rewarded for putting the lady in danger. A mysterious hunter, a skilled fighter, subordinates extremely strong bats to his will, and he knows someone very much like her. Looks like they need to find out more about the baronial family. Yuki was lying on the bed. He was bored, and the sounds of commotion outside only tempt him. Martha has brought him some tea, and they can have it together. They are not at home, and there is no point in following the stuffy rules. Martha agrees to expand a little. If someone finds them, she takes full responsibility. The next day, the Big Brother exam will be held. After drinking the tea, he realized what a virtuoso Martha was. The whole city is now in full swing in honor of the biggest event, the visit of the princess. He's supposed to be in this inn until Her Highness goes home. In the end, he didn't tell anyone about his encounter with the hooded girl. That girl used fire ancient magic. He had memorized the movements of her fingers, so he would probably be able to use the same magic to reproduce the symbol. He wondered what would happen to Dick if he did it on him. Maybe it was just as well that he was locked up in a hotel. If he was out on the street, he would immediately itch to experiment with magic. For students of magic, it's like a drug. By immersing yourself in the knowledge of magic, the possibilities are expanded. In the thirst to expand them even more, you plunge deeper into the study. As a result, the whole life is devoted to magic. He had seen several people caught up in this vicious cycle. It wasn't a pleasant sight. It looks like the exam will be held in the Kittrell Forest. For some reason, they put a cross on the mountain, and the swamp is too unpredictable, so it was abandoned. Surely that decision was made by that girl and the elderly warrior. Once in the mountains, which the mentor called very safe, they were immediately attacked by a monster. He doubts that they have any confidence left in the would-be teacher. Yuki looked at the cup. It seems that Martha was an only child in the family. If you meet a little older girl who looks very much like her mother, don't you think she'll start suspecting a blood relationship with her? Martha took this as a hint of the family's decency issues. Yuki said that as an example, and she thought about it. They say that there are 3 people like you in this world. Therefore, she will judge not by the face, but for some other reason. For example, her mother can bake delicious apple pies. Yuki just loves them. Her mother said that she learned to bake from her grandmother, and her grandmother from her great-grandmother. Therefore, their entire family through generations is not indifferent to apple pies. This ability is not transmitted if you do not live in the same house. That's enough for Yuki. Although he doubts that he will get another chance to meet that girl to ask her about her favorite dish. And it is completely unknown whether Alice's favorite dish has been preserved until this time. Martha is pleased to know that she was able to help. Yuki is grateful to her, so much so that he would like to take her with him when he leaves the house. If he expresses his passion in this way, she is ready to consider his offer. This is when he reaches the age of majority. In her absence, a package was delivered to the house. The package contained the claws of a black bear. They were a little burnt, but still went for a good price. The world is not without good people. Granny just laughed, clutching Yuki's handkerchief. Yuki has no idea who it might be. Sitting in a hotel is very tiring for him, but such a pastime with Martha brightens up his leisure time. I asked Martha to bring me some honey. Martha tells the master not to abuse it. A maid burst into his room. If he hadn't been there, Martha would have been scolded. Martha's very existence is a deterrent to the master's escape. A messenger arrived with instructions from Her Highness, the princess, that the whole family should arrive without exception, so they need to go back to the mansion immediately. Yuki is surprised. Cockle throws things. He didn't understand why he had to be recalled back to the guild. The letter said that he had put people who had come to inspect the area in danger. Originally, he should have been immediately recalled back to the guild for punishment. First, there was an exam to be held, and then the mentor had to immediately return to the guild. The mentor only chose the place where Zeros would perform best. It's a place where a simple kid like Yuki can hunt safely. Arriving for inspection was attacked by monsters. Those who are enrolled in the Magic Guild are allowed to choose their own teacher. By persuading Zeros to choose his teacher, he will be able to maintain a high position in the guild. But what if he fails the exam? Then the mentor will have to resort to drastic measures. There was a knock on his door. Zeros would like to discuss something with him. The door was unlocked. Zero's turned to his mentor. He is not sure that he will be able to pass the exam successfully. The mentor does not understand what has come over this young man again. He told you not to let up the slack. His Highness has already arrived at this domain. He is the heir to the barony of Grosseria, and with such pessimism, he only opens a gap for the ugly bastard to attack. Zero's bowed his head. The mentor is talking about Yuka. A bastard is a real harmful parasite in any noble family. This is their common enemy, and Cockle gritted his teeth. Something similar happened to his family. He tells Zero's because he doesn't want to let Mr. Zero's experience the same horror. Zero's was thinking about Yuka, about my little brother. Zero's closed his eyes. The mentor continues to blacken Yuki's personality. He's trying to get rid of Zero's, spreading bad rumors among the servants. Zero's looked at his mentor. Mentor Cockle opened his eyes. He's his only ally, and Yuki is their enemy. Today, Her Highness ordered the whole family to meet her without exception. There was no way she could find out about Yuki's existence. In order to get rid of Zero's, Yuki spread rumors. Does Zero's now understand the dangerous situation they are in? Mr. Zero's is a gifted man. He needs to believe in himself and use his strongest magic, so powerful that Her Highness would have no choice but to acknowledge it. Zero's agreed grimly with his mentor. The mentor keeps saying that defeat is unforgivable, and waiting for outstanding results. His honorable pupil, the heir to the baronial house, Lord Zero's Grosseria. Rumia was very happy that her little brother had returned home. Now she can proudly tell Her Highness that her brother is part of the Grosseria family. Yuki would have preferred to stand behind Kim with the rest of the staff. My father told them to be quiet. The carriage began to arrive. Carriage with Her Highness, the princess. My grandfather walked beside the carriage, and he noticed the boy. The boy bowed. Badiaseka didn't understand what Yuki was doing, because it was still early, but Yuki wanted to hide. He knew that Bunce and Clara were princess escorts, so he didn't want to show up at the mansion. My father began to say that it was an honor to host them, and all the members of the Grosseria family and the servants bowed. From the whole family, he wishes to express his deepest gratitude for giving Zero's Grosseria the opportunity to be examined by them. The princess is grateful for the warm welcome. She was coming down the stairs. However, they are not in the palace, and she didn't come here as a princess, but as a magic guild examiner. Therefore, there is no need to bow so low, and she turns to Zero's Grosseria. Yuki raised his head. Her voice was similar to that of the girl called Clara. She was looking directly at him now. Yuki saw the clip on her hair that Clara had given her. She introduced herself. Her name is Iris Risja. She had heard that he was an extremely skilled wizard, and looking forward to meeting in person. Father intervenes, explaining that he is Yuki's younger brother, and he points to Zero's, who will pass the exam. The grandfather and princess stared at him in surprise. Iris bowed and apologized to Yuki. And I've already turned to the real Zero's. It's a great honor for her to have the opportunity to appear before them. Zero's gritted his teeth. He glared at Yuki. Yuuka feels a little awkward. He realized that it was the princess and the knight protecting her. By itself, they will hide their identity. Although, he also did not give his name, so he was confused with his older brother. How difficult it is for him to pretend to be a simple person. He wants to run away right now. And now they're gonna have an exam. Since he has a strong connection to magic, the princess asks all outsiders to leave. Cockle bowed to the princess. He asked for permission to accompany the princess to the Kithril Forest, the location of the exam. The princess looked at him, and I agreed. Yuki thinks that if his brother passes the exam and gets into the guild, he will be able to make connections with influential people from high society. And then Grosseria's family will be well off, and he and his calm soul may disappear in the future. The Nosferatu monster will choose to silently pray for the happiness of its family from a distance. The princess says that they need an assistant to conduct the esteemed Zero's exam. My father thought about it, because there are no more people with knowledge of magic in their house. Deep knowledge is not necessary. For the exam, you will need the ability to manipulate your magic power, the ability to adapt to the situation and cope with the threatening danger. And the priest offers Yuki in this case. Yuki smiled. My father begins to praise him that he was very good at improvising and can hunt alone and bring prey to the house. Yuki doesn't like this, so Iris turns to Yuki for help with the exam. Her mentor tells her that he is a bastard. The princess only replies that her grandmother is also from the common people. If the blood of a commoner is unacceptable, then she must also immediately hand over her powers. The mentor does not want to say this, but about the situation of everyone. The tutor is surprised at how the princess addresses him. This exam is outside the scope of his authority. Work on finding a place to conduct the test is over. He must know his place. My father fully agrees with the princess. At the behest of Her Majesty, He instructs Yuki to help with the examination. Zeros thought it was much better that way. He took a step toward his younger brother, and I told him not to run away this time. It will make him feel the difference in origin. He knows very well that Yuki is turning the servants against him, but the next head of the family is Zeros, and no one else. And one day, he will change the entire baronial house to suit himself. Yuki looked at his older brother. My father doesn't understand what's going on there. Zeros turned to his father with a smile. He just made a small request to him. The mentor grinned. This is the forest that will be the exam venue. The princess had sent Bunce there beforehand. She explained their goal to reach the other side of the forest. Bunce will be in the way along the way. You need to break through the forest, overcoming all obstacles, and reach the goal. They need to wear this. These are copies of ancient artifacts created by the Magic Guild. They impose a physical enhancement effect on the wearer. You need to use it during the exam. Cockle chimes in again, thinking what an honor it is. Ancient artifacts are the legacy of an ancient civilization that transcends human understanding. Even if it is a copy, it is a great honor to be able to use such valuable artifacts during the exam, and he wants to express his admiration. Zero says it's a great honor for him, too. The princess explains that they are much weaker than real ancient artifacts, and after one use, the effect completely disappears. However, they should not forget that the relics are the epitome of all the technologies of the Magic Guild. Yuki carefully examines a copy of the ancient artifacts. In his time, there were all sorts of holy swords, holy spears, and other powerful artifacts that were actively used by the Holy Land Church. It turns out that now the real ones are lost, and humanity has made their likeness. The princess asks if they have any questions. Yuki doesn't understand the reason why he has to participate in this race. She needs to see the difference between the respected Zeros, who wields ancient magic, and him, a common man. Running through the woods at the speed of physical exertion can terrify even those who are used to it. Branches and tree trunks, slippery ground and wet grass, and they need to overcome them at a much faster speed than the normal speed. The princess giggled. Having sent a respected Zeros on such a run, you can't understand all his talent, but if you compare it with a person who is not used to strengthening, you will clearly see how much he was able to do magic. Yuki was just about to have a chat with his brother where their mentor wouldn't be able to see them. If they hate him so much, then Yuki doesn't mind leaving the house at all. But she doesn't understand some of what he says, and it's kind of disgusting to disappear without understanding it. But most importantly, if he leaves the house, leaving everything as it is, and something happens to Rumia and Marta, he will be forced to hate his older brother. Yuki put on the bracelet, and Zeros, too. The princess gives a countdown to the start of the race, says attention, and march. Yuki and Zeros quickly headed into the forest. Cockle asks the princess permission to inquire. He wants to know why the bastard was allowed to take the exam. Master Zeros has an amazing amount of magical power and has cultivated his talent through his teachings, and he thinks it would be insulting to compare him to some bastard. Pridesa asks him what this exam means for him. This is an opportunity for him to demonstrate the fruits of his teachings to the princess in person. His pupil is talented and strong. Even if on the way he encounters a formidable monster, he will have enough strength to defeat it, even if injuries cannot be avoided. The exam is a stage where they can demonstrate to her that his teachings have raised such an outstanding student. The princess believes that for this reason, he recommended an extremely dangerous mountain as a place to conduct the exam. The mentor doesn't understand who said such nonsense. The princess replied that this was told by her assistants, who went for an examination. The mentor thinks that they reported such nonsense because they were weak, and for a magician, the main thing is strength, just like in the days of the Temple of Elysium. Iris looked at her mentor in horror. Even one of the officers was surprised. The master apologized for mentioning the Temple of Elysium because it is taboo, but just mentioning it won't make anyone feel any worse. The princess says that this temple was destroyed, and so that no one else would repeat the stupid things done by that organization, a magic guild was founded. It feels as if the mentor has already forgotten about it. But Cockle didn't forget, he just had a thought, as Cockle himself would have done with such great power. The princess said nothing. She just looked at the forest. She hopes that the exam will pass without any accidents. Yuki turns to his older brother. It has a conversation to it. Zeros may not even stop. He just needs to listen to him. Zeros glanced at Yuki. Then he turned away. Yuki would like Zeros to listen to what they say at least once in a while. He doesn't have to sulk at him for no reason. Zeros shut him up. He's already got Yuki figured out, and he's trying to get his hands on the barony. Yuki wants to hear what time of year, month, day, and hour he tried to do this. Zeros could hear the servants talking about it. Cockle told him that Yuki had cursed about him in front of the servants, and Yuki did it every day. Even the night before last, Yuki was surprised. Actually, he was at the hotel with Martha the day before yesterday. Zeros keeps telling him to shut up. He won't give up his title, but Yuki said he didn't need it. And so each time Yuki denies all his actions. If he wasn't plotting to steal the position of heir from him, then why did the princess choose him? And how did she find out about the bastard's existence? Yuki offers to talk openly and asks not to tell anyone about it. The other day, he sneaked out of the mansion into the mountains. And there he met this princess and an axe-wielding grandfather named Bunce. They were attacked by monsters. Yuki saved them and took them out. He didn't give his name. That's probably when they found out that there were boys in the baronial family with black hair and eyes. Why he was called in, he has no idea. Zeron looked at him. If Zeros thinks Yuki is lying, then he can ask the grandfather with the axe. Zeros was silent for a moment, and he began to talk. Zeros surreptitiously creating magic, and Yuki notices it. Yuki always does what he can't do, and Zeros strikes at it. Yuki realized that it was an ancient summoning magic. My brother knows how to surprise. Yuki defended himself with his blade. He reached for his sword, cutting through the air with it, but Yuki still falls off his feet. He gets to his knees. This is the end of Yuki's patience. He can't take it anymore. After all, pretending to be an ordinary person is beyond him. I'm tired of being patient and holding back, and he didn't give a damn about magic guilds and their exams. Now the family showdown begins. Yuki used a double physical boost. He'll punch his brother in the face, and at the same time beat all the bad things out of Cockle, and how a decent monster will disappear from their lives forever. Zeros thought that he had broken away from Yuki. Zeros looked startled. His little brother will always catch up with him. Yuki is very angry. He wants his brother to listen to what he is being told. Yuki catches up with Zeros. Zeros doesn't understand how he got so fast. 2 arrows attacked Yuki. Yuki turned around and knocked them down. And then he continued to chase after his brother. Zeros asks him how he can move at such great speed. Yuki explains that depending on the use of magic power, the effect of this copy of an ancient artifact changes. Zeros looked down at his artifact. Zeros thinks this is nonsense, and he wonders why his younger brother is better than him. Yuki will tell him. He is, in fact, the reincarnation of a mage who lived 200 years ago, and has a strange fondness for ancient magic. Thanks to this, he can apply a double physical boost to himself and move twice as fast. He held up a symbol on his palm. Zeros thinks that Yuki is turning on the fool. It stops. Zeros is going to shut his lying mouth right now. He stopped running away like a coward. Yuki always annoyed his older brother. Probably can't stand bastards. Zeros shouted no to him. He hates it specifically. He looks at it, and it makes his stomach churn. Zeros had been trying to rub his nose since he was a kid. Rumia and Marta were always friends with him, and Yuki noticed. Zeros was just leaving. He began to strive to get into the magic guild. He's so sick of this ancient magic and all his studies. If it wasn't for Yuki, none of this would have happened. Yuki doesn't like being made extreme. Zeros looked resolutely at his brother. The OS uses ancient magic again, and summons the spirits of wind and fire. He ordered them to put Yuki on one knee in front of him. Yuki thought that they should fight with their fists, and drives every little thing out of its way, with a sword cutting the spirit in two, and passing on to his brother. They should not stand in the way of the Nosferatu monster. Zeros calls again. Yuki admits that ancient magic is strong as usual. Not only does the summoning pass quickly, but it also takes place without a pause. Zeros is confronted by a difficult person, but a monster. He doesn't intend to go back to his family anyway, so he can fully kick his brother, and then Cockle. Yuki was dripping blood. He was standing in front of Zeros. Yuki was wiping his face. There was a wound on his arm. Zeros became concerned for his brother. Did Zeros now realize that this was a real monster? He was holding an amulet in his hand. Zeros knows better. He thinks about Yuka, about my father, how her father had praised Yuki, part of his family. Zeros began to wonder who he was. Yuki quickly rushed towards Zeros. They were only a few steps away. The older brother continued to dig into himself. Yuki wants to end the family showdown, just like normal people, and they'll say goodbye forever. Yuki advises Zeros to grit his teeth, not bite his tongue, and stay on his feet properly. Zeros didn't have time to call out to Yuki. As I experienced a powerful blow to the chest, Zeros hit the ground. The amulet popped out of his hand. He fell to the ground. Zeros is in pain. Yuki's hand is dripping with blood. This is the end of their relationship. Zeros didn't want to hurt his brother, but he did hurt his arm. It was covered in blood. Yuki walked over to his brother. Zeros can do whatever he wants with the baronial family. He's tired of repeating himself, but he's not interested in the title at all. As befits a monster, it will simply disappear from his life. but if he dares to do anything to Martha and Rumia, the Zeros will know the wrath of Nosferatu. Zeros was shaking all over. At that moment, a knight caught them. No one allowed them to fight between examinees. Zeros sat up to explain. For Yuki, it was all over. There's no point in Big Brother covering for him. Yuuka wanted to say goodbye to Marta, but since that was the case, she would ask Dick and the others to distract them. Zeros says it's just a normal family showdown. He accosted Yuka, and he refused to listen to it. The argument was too heated. Yuki asked him if he was sure he didn't want to reveal his background, but Zeros wouldn't dare say that there was a monster in the bloodline of the baronial family. And how would he be able to confirm his words? In this situation, all he knew was that Yuki was too tough for him. Just knowing that made him feel better. He knew that little brother wouldn't spread any slander about him, but for the welfare of his family, he had no choice but to believe his mentor's words. Yuki thinks his brother is so stubborn. Zeros turns to his younger brother. He's his little brother, so he doesn't dare disappear without warning. Yuki walked over to his brother. Anyway, if he suddenly disappeared, Rumia would cry, and Her Highness Iris might think something was wrong with Zeros. It is his responsibility to protect the house, so as the future head, he orders not to disappear. Yuki clutched his neck, and I thought, what a problematic creature these people are. The knight asks Zeros what he intends to do next, whether he is going to continue the exam. As part of the exam, he will need to fight him at least once. Zeros gives up. He doesn't deserve to be a member of the Magic Guild. He gripped the amulet. Zeros is confident in his decision. The knight took the arrow, and he threw it in the air as a sign that he was disqualified. Word should reach Her Highness soon. Zeros decided to check his brother's words and turned to Bunce. He wonders if Yuki really saved his life. Bunce confirmed it. Yuki expected him to deny it. That was why Bunce and Her Highness mistook Yuki for Zeros. The princess did not intend to offend Zeros. Zeros smiled. It was just that he was once again convinced that he wasn't Yuki's match. There were some sounds. There were screams. It is in that direction that Her Highness is located. Bunce tells them to stop talking. They need to return to Her Highness immediately. Yuki will rush forward. Yuki knows, she's just like that. But one by one, images from the past pop up in my head. And I thought, what kind of problem children he has. A few minutes earlier, Cockle saw a black arrow in the air, and he couldn't believe that his student failed the exams after all the effort he put into it. The princess suggested another possibility, that he had given up. There may have been an incident. She does not deny the possibility that the exam may need to be repeated, and offers to wait for the return of those three. The mentor was wrong, and it makes him angry that he put so much effort into it. He knew it. It was a mistake. Even after 200 years, people never knew their place, and it is useless to explain this to ignorant fools. The knights performed before the princess. Cockle started showing disrespectful behavior in front of Her Highness. Cockle whispers something to himself. Iris flinched, and she ordered me not to go near my mentor. Cockle summoned the spirits of wind and fire. 12 pieces. He took down an entire army in an instant. Iris didn't take her eyes off him. Cockle, in this case, goes to the backup plan. It was his mistake to rely on the child of an unrecognized redneck, and climbing as a mentor is nonsense. The princess urges him to stop immediately, reminding him that he is the son of a former minister, and he is doing this. Cockle asks to descend from the depths of darkness, and makes a call. Dark beasts appear. They growl at the princess like dogs. The princess understands that something is wrong with Cockle, because he did not have the magical powers to perform such a high-level summon. Cockle's father did not choose him as his heir. He dared to give the title to a bastard, and the royal family approved of his decision. Even if it was to demonstrate their strength to the royal family, he had to put up with a stupid sucker and a cocky bastard. Truly, how uselessly he had wasted his precious time in this outback. But here and now, here is a member of the royal family. There is no better opportunity for a grandiose statement about the revival. Cockle speaks of the revival of the great Temple of Elysium. The princess was wary. Yuki rushes towards her with all his might. Church of the Holy Land, Temple of Elysium. This is an organization of sorcerers, the first in the world to discover the remains of an ancient civilization, Elysium. They learned ancient magic with ancient artifacts and gained their power with wisdom, with which they went to war against the beastmen and monsters and drove them into a corner of the mainland, greatly expanding the domain of the human race. This vast domain later caused a feud between the human kings that escalated into war. The conflict should not have grown beyond a small skirmish. However, the church intervened and a small feud turned into the biggest war in history, the War of the Eight Kings. It continued until the sage interfered and stopped the madness of the church. Ancient artifacts are scattered all over the world. The ancient magic was lost. As a result, the war ended and the church was destroyed. And now the princess is conjuring and gives an ifrit kick. The dogs dodge. The princess can't hit them, they're moving too fast. The mentor thinks that she seriously thought that the great church was destroyed. That won't happen as long as outstanding people like him inherit the ancient artifacts of the church. Cockle tells them to rejoice. They were lucky enough to be present at a historic event, the revival of the great Temple of Elysium. The dogs attacked the remaining knights. One of them impaled him with his spear. The mentor originally planned to send Zeros to the Magic Guild and use them as a tool to revive the church. Naive and trusting children, it was easy enough for him to fool her into trusting only him and turn them into a convenient tool. And by luring Her Highness here, he had fulfilled his minimal role. Now, using the princess, Cockle will turn this baronial house into a foothold of the Temple of Elysium. Bats appeared in the sky. Iris realized that they were Yuki's mice. I noticed the symbol on their wings. Dick goes with his comrades to attack. They throw fireballs. Cockle screams in pain, and the dogs do. Bats use physical reinforcement and ifrit strike. The princess only mastered this ancient magic by herself. I can't believe it's used by bats, and even a Q. The bats continue to attack. Cockle tries to protect himself from them with his hand, and in spite of his anger, he began to breathe heavily. This is their chance. The princess orders the knights to attack as soon as the bombardment ends, and they must neutralize Cockle. Yuki told Iris to stay out of the way. He stepped forward to protect the princess. Cockle chuckled at the esteemed Yuki. Had he used ancient magic? And he thinks it's impossible. This is some kind of mistake. The mentor still doesn't believe that the dirty bastard could do it. It was as if Yuki had teleported away. He was behind Cockle. Cahill looked down at his hand that Yuki had injured. No one saw when he drew his sword. Yuki turned to the mentors. He didn't hear clearly, and she wants him to repeat what he said about his precious family. Cockle shouted that Yuki was a bastard. Yuki reminds them that Cockle is their teacher, and it should answer the child's question. The princess stops Yuki from killing the man. Yuki asks why. There is a possibility that he is a follower of the forbidden church of the Temple of Elysium. We need to take him into custody and question him about everything. Cockle insulted Yuki's entire family. In his previous life, he could only protect Lyle, his family, with his sacrifice. In this life, he gained strength, the power with which I was able to protect my loved ones. Besides, he was trying to harm the princess. I didn't deserve any mercy, Cockle thinks. So what if he used his brother? His older brother despised him, calling him a bastard. His older brother only followed his instructions. Cockle goes on to say that his older brother despised and insulted him. Brothers can also quarrel, just like any other people. Rather, on the contrary, a mere mortal was able to seriously fight with the monster. Perhaps my brother is a great man, but there is no forgiveness for the mentor, knowing that he was trying to use his family for his own dirty purposes. Other than death, Yuki doesn't accept any other outcome. Cockle used a spell to activate a copy of an ancient artifact, makes the summon a catalyst. A large symbol appeared on the ground. The princess is surprised that this is an ancient summoning magic. Yuki saw that it was a familiar catalyst. I thought about the basilisk, but there must be something bigger than it. Probably a griffon. He guessed right. A griffin appeared in the sky. This griffin feather was given to my mentor by the priest of the Temples of Elysium Church. He would kill Yuki, and Her Highness would be captured. The command sounds get a weapon. The knights run to guard the princess. They ask Her Highness to step back. The princess uses an ifrit punch. He has to hit the griffon, and Cockle activates the barrier. The barrier takes on the princess's strike. Ancient magic itself is incredibly powerful, but there's still something wrong. If the mentor's magic was always so great, then he might very well have taken a high position in the guild. The griffon is the mentor's familiar. Cockle hopes that he will deal with these pathetic interruptions. Yuki warns you to watch out for the beak, forelegs, and hind legs, but now he has a cockle on his back, so he's unlikely to use his beak to attack. If they are going to attack, they need to do it in the middle of the body, just below the base of the wings. The princess is surprised that the young man knows such a thing. Yuki heard it from a friend. The princess orders the knights to gather in one group. They should hold the defense with shields, and Yuki will attack with magic. He had once hunted for griffin feathers as experimental material. The griffon launched its attack. The knights prepared their shields. After making its kick, the griffon charged up. The mentor instructs the dirty bastard not to stand in his way. The princess uses magic. The griffon glanced at the attacks and tries to dodge them. It is very difficult to hit the griffin in the sky. The master says that this is the legacy of the great Temple of Elysium. They need to try knocking it down first if they don't agree. Yuki will do just that and use soul defense back. He pushes up from his back. Yuki approaches Cockle. Cockle thinks that the bastard is too arrogant. Just because he was able to use ancient magic, it is enough for him to change the flight path, and Yuuka won't catch up with him. Yuki calls her servants, and the bats rushed to his aid. He leapt at them. He asked me to hold him back. Dick accepted the decree. I pushed myself away from the bats. Cockle turned around. Yuki crept closer to his mentor, and so they met. Cockle is stunned for the bastard to do this, and he asks me what he's all about. Yuki repeats his mentor's words. He's a mutt of unknown origin. Does the mentor know how to use magic properly? When you can definitely hit the enemy, and uses an Ifrit punch. There was a bright flash in the sky. Yuki hit the Griffon. The Griffon began to burn, and a mentor. There were heart-rending screams. Their bodies fell to the ground. They fell with a crash. Yuki landed. It was his first time fighting in the sky in this body. Fortunately, everything went well. Others began to call him a gifted child. Such a talent is rare even in a magic guild. The surrounding people began to clamor. But now something else is more important. The princess came up behind him and asked him to stop. Cockle was already seriously injured. Besides, he didn't have such strong magic in the first place. That forced conscription will not remain without consequences. Yuki thinks that's why he doesn't need to kill. The princess explains that the mentor will be recalled back to the guild and will be punished. There's no need to get your hands dirty for such a talented wizard. Yuki shuddered. Iris looked a lot like Alice, he sighed. Yuki answered as his highness ordered. The princess said that such things should be said to your face, and not after a disgruntled tusking. Ancient magic and spirit summoning, and may he descend. The idolized 9th priest of the Temple of Elysium. The princess and Yuki turned to Cockle. He didn't have much magic, just a simple tutor, but he took action like a vessel of energy. In the direction of the forest, a restless voice was heard asking what had happened. It was Bunce, and on his back lay Zeros. Bunce says the child is in agony. Zeros groans in pain. Yuki fears for his brother's life. Bunce laid the boy carefully on the ground. Yuki rushes to their aid. His older brother continues to scream. Yuki noticed that a barrier had been set up. According to the reaction of the others, Cockle didn't have any magic power left for this, and Yuki wonders where he gets it from. He understood. He calls for Mr. Bunce. Yuki will look after her brother, and he must return to her highness guard as soon as possible. Zeros called softly to his brother. Yuki asks him what his mentor gave him, and requires you to show it. Zeros shows an amulet that enhances magic power. The mentor said that it would be easier to activate ancient magic with this. He will gladly share his magic power with Zeros. But everything turned out to be exactly the opposite. Cockle draws energy from his brother with the help of an amulet, so this trinket is also a copy of an ancient artifact. Bunce and the princess continue to fight their mentor. Their attacks don't work. Zeros apologizes to Yuki. He considered him an enemy and started a fight, and he fully deserved it. Yuki smiled. His brother is wrong. He doesn't hold a grudge against Zeros at all. Yuki cut his finger with a dagger, rather the opposite. Yuki always wanted to have a family showdown like an ordinary person for once. He was always envious, to be honest, so she wouldn't let him die for nothing. It wouldn't be funny if a pathetic slug like Cockle took a kinsman away from a Nosferatu monster. Tears welled up in Zero's eyes. Yuki uses her mystical blood. It will crack the nested spell to the very depths. The hack is complete. 2 commands are programmed transfer of magical energy from the brother to the Cockle and increase the psychotic influence of the brother's Cockle with the forced sending of visual images. Yuki understood how the worm was telling his brother lies. First, it will stop the current flow of energy, and then at once zafagatchet your magic power in 100-fold volume and will provide a total overload. Yuki impatiently shouts at the amulet that it shattered. The amulet cracked. There were more cracks, and it crashed. Zeros screamed violently. Then he breathed a sigh of relief. The magic power drain stopped. Cockle screamed, and he began to pull on the ground. The knights were even startled by the surprise. Yuki destroyed the amulet that sent Cockle magic power. It is unlikely that he can withstand such a powerful spell with his original one, and Cockle is now lying motionless. Everyone in the room looked at him. The magical arteries all over his body burst. He just died as a mage. A natural outcome for someone who has encroached on ancient magic is beyond their capabilities. Most likely, whatever it was that he was trying to summon had completely absorbed all of his magic power. He will never be able to use magic again in his life, and his sanity may also be shattered. This is almost an actual death. The princess looked at Yuki. She doesn't see a single reason to get her hands dirty. Yuki looked at her. I asked Yuki Grosseria who he was. Bunce and the princess waited for him to answer. Yuki started to speak haltingly. Zeros shouted that Yuki was his younger brother. He may be his father's bastard, but that doesn't change the fact that he's his younger brother. I asked them what was bothering them. Yuki looked at his brother in surprise. In that case, the princess wants to ask. She asks him why his younger brother is proficient in ancient magic. Zeros began to panic. He turned his gaze to his brother. Yuki felt it. He wished the man wouldn't look at him like that. In fact, he was going to disappear right away. But now is not the best time. Yuki replied that he had learned ancient magic from his older brother. Thinking about his future as a bastard, his brother gradually taught magic with the knowledge he had received from the tutor. And then he tried to use it, and it was a miracle. The princess turned to Zerosa to make sure. Zeros confirms his brother's words. After finishing his classes with his mentor, he shared with Yuki everything that he had learned during the day to consolidate what he had learned, only he was much more talented than he was. And in a moment, he had even learned magic that he couldn't have done. He became incredibly offended, so he began to treat him harshly. He begged his mentor to let him take the Magic Guild exams, just to rub his brother's nose. It was clear to show that he was better than him. That's all Zeros wanted. As for the temple, he knew absolutely nothing. Yuki thinks so too. The Church of the Holy Land is one of the main taboos of this time. The older brother sought to raise the status of the family. Yuki doubts that he will touch such dangerous stuff. Yuki said that Cockle attacked the princess alone during the exam, so it's obvious that his brother had nothing to do with it. If they were for the same thing, they would have attacked together. It looked like this amulet was drawing all the magic power out of my brother, Yuki realized when he himself collapsed due to excessive exertion. The princess sees that Cockle has exactly the same one. It was in his hand. If the princess examines her mentor's amulet, she will immediately understand that her brother was only being used. It will be a direct proof. The princess nodded. It seems that there is no doubt that this crime is exclusively committed by Cockle Maijin. When she returned to the capital, she would immediately investigate his connection to the temple. Now she turns to Zeros. Due to an incident arranged by the mentor, this exam became invalid. However, he has the right to retake. The princess asked him if he would like to take the exam again. Zeros refused. He's not worthy. Yuki is better instead. Yuki looked at his brother in surprise, not understanding why my brother would allow it. Zeros goes on to praise his younger brother that he is strong and brave, and if he gets serious about learning ancient magic, he will become the best magician in the world. And I am sure that he is the person who can rewrite the whole story. Yuki looked at his brother. The princess says that there is some truth in what he says. She also saw an excellent talent in the esteemed Yuki, and Bunce would even like to cross swords with him once. Yuki thinks that he should go to a normal school instead. The princess takes his hand, saying that it's a sin not to develop your talent. She, the 8th Princess Iris Rishja, announces the admission of Yuki from the baronial family to the Magic Guild for an internship. The knights cheered loudly. Zeros started to cry. Yuki now cannot refuse in such a situation. They're coming home with a message that amazes everyone. The father praises his sons. Cooks cook on a large table. And in the evening, everyone celebrated this event. Yuki, rocking back and forth in his chair, thinks that he is going to train in a magic guild. If you think about it, why not? At the Magic Guild, he will be able to learn more about the history after his death and what happened to Fair Village. At the same time, studying ancient magic, you may be able to find out the reason why he was reborn. Besides, if he suddenly refused after all, it would be disrespectful to the princess. It wouldn't be good if the royal family harbored a grudge against their house because of this. And in general, my father was so happy for him. So be it. As part of the study of humanity, he will visit the capital. There was a knock on his door. Yuki was disturbed by Martha, and he says that Her Highness is waiting for him in the living room of a remote building of the mansion. It seems that she was given a reception banquet in the main mansion. Martha thinks she slipped out. Yuki thinks that she definitely likes to slip around. Martha thinks they'll get along well. Although why would he want a princess if he had Martha? Sometimes she thinks he's trying to stop her heart. Yuki wouldn't do that to her partner, who she trusts more than herself. And to return that trust, she decided to follow him. Yuki looked at her in surprise. He asks her again if she wants to follow him to the Magic Guild, but he just wasn't sure if she would agree to go with him. As she was told, those who received a recommendation from the royal family are allowed to take an escort to the guild's training facility, and the Baron personally asked her to accompany him. He puts Yuki in her arms. Yuki thinks about what to say, and he apologized. Martha said she shouldn't. It's much calmer than sitting here worrying about him. And again, he apologizes for being such an unreliable gentleman. Yuki smiled. And Martha, too. Yuki trusts her partner. If she can't get married, it's the master's fault. Then he will take responsibility for himself if he does not fall into the wandering life of the world. Martha laughed and thanked him for giving her hope and despair at the same time, and he wants Yuki to stop doing that again. Yuki entered the room where the princess was waiting for him. Iris greeted him with a smile. She thanked Yuki for making time for her. "I'd like to have a little private talk with him." Iris thanked Yuki for saving her life today. Yuki said that not today, but today again. Then in the forest, he saved a girl named Clara. This is her alias when she wants to act freely on behalf of the Magic Guild. The princess position has little freedom, and no one will let you go out of the palace so easily. So the princess ended up in those mountains on behalf of the guild. Yuki asked what the princess wanted to talk about. The princess apologizes for arbitrarily announcing his guild internship in front of everyone without knowing his will, and she wants him to know. She truly admired his outstanding abilities and believes that Yuki is trustworthy, so she wanted him to serve beside her. With someone as reliable as him by her side, she could devote herself to researching magic with peace of mind. She would like to formally invite him to join the Magic Guild once again, and tell him the reason why she clings to magic so much. Yuki also thinks it's a bit strange that a member of the royal family is so closely associated with magic despite being in mortal danger. Iris was silent for a moment, and she told me in confidence that she was different from other princes and princesses. Her grandmother was a commoner. One of the marquises of the previous generation fell in love with her at first sight and took her as his wife. She was a very wise and beautiful woman with an incredible talent in magic. However, it had one unusual physiological feature. Yuki doubts that he should be privy to such things, but the princess is sure. Her conscience wouldn't allow her to ask Mr. Yuki for something while keeping secrets from him. Her heart tells her that he will believe her words. She thinks so for some reason. Yuki is listening. Iris returns to the story of her grandmother. It differed from the others in two ways. The first was that she had much more magical power than other people. I moved on to the second point. She was always young. Yuki didn't take his eyes off the princess. She had met her in person once as a child. She was also in her 50s and looked very young. You can't give me more than 20. Not so long ago, she passed away. By the way, my mother also left this world in an accident after marrying the king and giving birth to her. Yuki hopes that the princess will not say that she is already over 30 years old. But she's only 13 years old. Yuki thought that they have a lot of magic power and eternal youth. By the way, the bats that he gave his blood to also seemed to live longer than usual, and their magic power was growing. Among the people, he gave mystical blood to only one. It was Alice, but he couldn't remember exactly how much he'd given her back then. Yuki asked her what her grandmother's name was. Her name was Rachel. If you met a 50-year-old grandmother as a child, then it's definitely not Alice. Yuka would really like to meet her in person for once and have a chat with her. Iris shares his feelings. She herself would like to hear what it's like to live without getting old at all. For them, this is beyond comprehension. The princess, unfortunately, does not know the reason for this feature. My mother was no different from other people. Yuki asked, probably unlike her. Iris lowered her eyes. The master is very perceptive. She also has much more magical power than the others. Even in the royal family, almost no one can use an Ifrit's punch. Yuki had drawn a symbol of this magic on Dick's wings with the others, and they'd done it there. For the House of Marquises, the peculiarity of grandmother's physiology was not a problem. However, things are different with the royal family. She had heard a lot about this particular feature. That's also why I joined the Magic Guild. She wanted to know who she was. Yuki understands that the princess had to work hard, and all for the sake of getting to know your roots. She wants to hone her skills and be recognized by everyone as a sorcerer. Take a high position among magicians and study their origins. This is the reason why she clings to magic. The princess sighed, and she said resolutely, if possible, she would like Yuki to help her. Yuki looked at her sadly. He lowered his eyes. He noticed that the princess's hands were shaking. Shitao revealed herself to an almost complete stranger. Naturally, she's scared. Yuki accepts an invitation to join a magic guild. Iris's mouth dropped open in surprise. She started toward him. She took his hand and thanked him. And I'd like to ask you something else. She would like him to be her knight. Women from the royal family are allowed to choose a knight in their retinue upon reaching the age of 13. Many people choose themselves from among the influential nobles, but she would like to choose him. Yuki reminds him that he is the Baron's bastard. The princess doesn't care. He has already shown off his outstanding talents to everyone. Yuki can't believe that something so important can be solved just by words. The princess explains that for official intercession, you must first get permission from your father, at least for the period of training in a magic guild. He can become her friend and classmate, simultaneously protecting her from danger. Yuki pulls back a little. The princess wants to learn more about her physiological characteristics and its origin. If it turns out that this girl is a descendant of Alice, it turns out that that feature is because of him. Yuki wants to ask her highness about something. Does the princess like venison steak and thin skin with hot sauce? Iris hadn't expected to hear such a question. Then she thought about it. She hasn't tried it yet, but she likes spicy food. Yuki asked just in case, because the dish is rustic and not likely to be eaten by a member of the royal family. Even if we postpone the issue of descendants, they were brought together like this by fate, perhaps for a reason. In addition, he has a desire to help her get to her roots. So be it. He would stay by her side while he was in the capital. He said he had no objection to protecting her highness. It's not official yet. He humbly accepts the mission of accompanying her to the Magic Guild. Iris looked at Yuki in confusion. She pressed her hands together. After thanking him, Iris said that she would report to her father herself. Soon, there will be informational lectures and a Magic Guild admission ceremony for new members. So Yuka recommends that you arrive in the capital in about a month, so as not to miss these events. Yuki lowered his head, and I'd like to hear one last word from Iris. And he said, there isn't a church of the Holy Land, is there? The princess was surprised by the question, and she said it was destroyed. After searching Cockle's room, Bunce and the other knights found a copy of the letter. It was not specified to whom it was addressed, but it contained many praising remarks to the temple. Where he managed to get that amulet is not yet known. The princess had heard rumors of an organization honoring the ideals of the fallen Temple of Elysium. Without a doubt, the Temple of Elysium is taboo, but there are people who study it. If they are so interested in this topic, they can arrange a meeting with a specialist in this field. Yuki Yaro agreed to this. Princess once again thanked you for your time. She said goodnight. Then she left. This means that Yuka will have to protect the princess during her training in the Magic Guild. Good conditions. If there were experts studying the Holy Land Church, then perhaps he would be able to find out more information about them. Maybe there are other church fanatics like Cockle. He's terrified of what these psychopaths might do. You need to be prepared for anything. But that's after he goes to church. Zero's invited me to his room, and Yuki went to see his brother. Yuki brings back memories. He hadn't been in his brother's room in 3 years. There used to be a map of the entire baronial territory and a whole bunch of books about it. The only things that catch your eye right now are the Magic Guild textbooks and exam notes. Zero's had invited him here to ask him some questions. Yuki thought that he wanted to ask if he was actually the reincarnation of an immortal sorcerer. Zero's is completely indifferent to this topic, and he wants to ask about something else. He looked at his brother gravely. Yuki was startled. He doesn't care who his brother really is. He has no intention of divulging this secret. Does Yuki believe his words? He asked. Yuki knows that his brother is stubborn and straightforward. He will definitely keep his words. Zero's looked at his brother with wide eyes. His younger brother never ceases to amaze him. Zero's picked up a sword from the table. He drew it from its scabbard, and he said this is an oath. Zero's vows that he will remain Yuki's ally no matter what. If he doubts these words, then Yuki should push the hilt and take his life. Yuki doesn't understand why he started by swearing loyalty to the knight. Zero's explains this by saying that he saved him and only returns his debt. Yuki thinks that his brother has become too direct. And in general, everything that happened is entirely the fault of Cockle. My brother has nothing to do with it. Yuki thinks they are two different things. Zero's means it's about his conscience. Yuki thinks how hard it is for him. He was as direct and stubborn as a wild boar, but surprisingly caring. Zero's is a pain in the ass. That's why Yuka can't take her eyes off these people. Yuki accepts his vow. But it's still not enough for Zero's to repay the debt. Yuki hints to his brother that he needs to do something urgently about his stubbornness. Zero's, as the heir to the baronial family, still has to take a responsible approach to everything. And he remembers that breakfast is coming soon, and waiting for his brother at the common table in the main building. But Yuki is waiting for March, and therefore refuses his offer, and offers to eat him twice. A growing body needs a dense diet, and pushes his brother, but it stops. They saw their little sister. My sister notices that Zero's and Yuki have become friends. Zero's apologized to Rumia for making her worry. Rumia lashed out at Yuki. She's so glad they made up. Just like Brother Zero's always wanted. Yuki doesn't want Rumia to cling to him alone. He sends her to embrace her Brother Zero's. Brother Zero's was stubborn and mischievous all the time, so he didn't deserve a hug, so Rumia said. Zero's thought he could do without them. Yuki will be going to the Magic Guild to train very soon, so let him treat Rumia while he can. They will also be free to visit the main building. Zero's will get permission from his father. Rumia wants to get the whole family together at the same table for breakfast, and in this way, he managed to reconcile with his family, solving one of the major problems that tormented him all the time. The same night, he had a dream that he hadn't had in a long time. The familiar throne room, Dean Nosferatu reading a book, and he was addressed as a lord. It was Lyle, and he still hadn't gone home, as Nosferatu had noticed. The boy laughed. At that time, he was only 8 years old, and he ran happily to the lord. At the very back of the castle is the throne room. To be more precise, that was the name jokingly given to the room where he taught lessons to village children. Nosferatu asked Lyle why he didn't come home. Lyle asked Dean to teach him and showed him the book. Dean decided it was too late for that kind of thing, but he praises his aspirations. He has a lot of grammatical and arithmetic errors. He asked the boy to look out the window. Lyle saw that it was already dark, and Lyle must have heard the evening bell. I asked him what he should do then. Lyle said happily, learning. Nosferatu gets annoyed, telling Lyle to scram home before it gets completely dark. Lyle's not scared. No monsters spawn in this castle. This is due to the fact that he and adults periodically exterminate them in the area. If Lyle understood, then he needed to go home. He turns the boy in the direction of the door. Lyle starts to cry, and asks my lord to stop. People stick to him and smile at a monster like Nosferatu. People even after 200 years of life remain a mystery to him. Nosferatu never understood why he was suddenly so eager to learn. Lyle heard the girl say that she liked smart boys, but Lyle wants to explain that that's not why he wants to study. Her words that she wants to become the headman's wife also have nothing to do with it. Nosferatu is surprised. The answer came out of his mouth. Nosferatu comes to the conclusion that Lyle wants to win the girl's heart. She is the first beauty in the village. Lyle starts hitting Nosferatu to make him stop talking about it. Nosferatu sighed. He has to go home today. This is not up for discussion. Lyle started to whimper. In return, Nosferatu suggests arriving 30 minutes earlier than usual tomorrow. Lyle cheers loudly. Nosferatu asked the boy to tell his father that he had allegedly asked for help with the cleaning. So be it. He would teach him additional lessons before the others arrived. Lyle looks at the teacher admiringly. Morning came. Lyle greeted Nosferatu loudly. Nosferatu had told him to be there in half an hour, and he'd just come running with the sun coming up. One day, Remilia announced that she had decided to marry Lyle. Nosferatu considered, and I understood why the peasants in the village were all heartbroken as one. Remilia asked her to teach her numbing magic as a wedding gift. She swears that she won't use it on anyone else but Lyle. Nosferatu was afraid of what she was up to with her intended. Lyle is popular with girls. Remilia speaks enthusiastically about him, that he is so courageous and hardworking, responsible and sincere. There's not a single girl in the world who doesn't fall in love with him. But Nosferatu isn't sure. Remilia looked at him. She began to chant a spell. Nosferatu tells her not to threaten her with the magic he taught her, and he thinks they're perfect for each other. Remilia knew he would understand. She had liked him since childhood. Nosferatu asked her why she had made the marriage conditions then, but he looks so cute to her when he's working so hard for her. Nosferatu thought that human women were frightening creatures. As they get married, she plans to set him a new vector for efforts a lot of kids. The Nosferatu was beginning to feel uneasy about Lyle. Nosferatu is wondering what to do with them. He puts the bottle on the table. Nosferatu says that this tincture is made from the herb Hames, which has a powerful stimulating effect, so it should be given in moderate doses. Remilia hugged Nosferatu tightly. Remilia glanced at him, and he says that in return, they also plan to give him a gift. Both of them adore him so much that they can be said to be ranked first and second in the Lord's Adorers ranking. Does Nosferatu know what will happen if two such people get married? He has no idea. The girl explains that they will have a daughter who adores the Lord more than anyone else in the world, and she would love to be his bride. Nosferatu was surprised, and he thinks it's nonsense, and drooped. He plopped down in a chair, and he said that they would all die before him anyway. Remilia was surprised. She asked him if that was why he was always alone. Nosferatu asks if she knew how hard it was when their parents left this world. He is afraid to imagine what will happen to him in the case of his daughter-in-law, but she and Lyle are going to make a lot of babies. Maybe at least one immortal will be born, and then will be able to become a companion of his long, long life. Nosferatu thinks it's a miracle probability. The girl assures that she will try hard, and he asks the girl not to bring Lyle to the grave with her efforts. He hands her a lapis stone. It has the property of accumulating magical power. I managed to find a high-frequency stone. I polished it myself. A wedding gift from Nosferatu, and wishes Remilia happiness, which she will certainly do. Nosferatu was sitting next to Alice. He said that everything was fine. She's not in any danger. Alice looked at him. Nosferatu continued to bestow mystical blood and use its purification. The critical condition has passed. Alice noticed that he looked sad. When she got sick, he went around looking glum all the time. Alice wondered why. He can't bear to watch people close to him die young, like he's being unfair with his unmoderated body. Alice rolled over on her side, and she said she'd try. The cleansing is progressing, so she should feel better soon, and he will definitely give her a reward for her efforts. When she grows up, he must make her his bride. She looked at him, confused. Nosferatu had a sad look in his eyes. He sighed. Alice called him a pest. This is due to the fact that he responds in this way to the recognition of the Virgin. Alice will tell you more about this when she recovers. She would become Alice Nosferatu and spend the rest of her life with her lord. He would consider her offer when she was older. Alice hopes he doesn't say those words to everyone. Nosferatu are starting to get scared of her. She asks him if he thinks she'll forget when she grows up. He asks you not to read the immortal mage's mind. Time flies differently for them or for him, and he wasn't going to hold her future responsible for what he'd just said. And she offers to make a bet. Even as an adult, she would never forget those feelings. If he doesn't forget, then he should make her his bride. Nosferatu looked sad, and he wondered who would continue Lyle's line. Alice reassured him. In the tummy, my mother already has a second baby. Lyle is overusing the Hames herb tincture. Alice said he was still young and wouldn't die. Nosferatu scolds her it's not right for a child to say that, and he tells her to go to bed. Alice looked at him, and she closed her eyes. It wasn't long before he died in his previous life. Then the Holy Land Church laid eyes on him. Then what happened to Lyle, Remilia, and Alice? He doesn't know. Couldn't have known. Nosferatu was distracted. He heard a commotion. I hear voices. And thinks who they belong to. They must be memories. Lyle tells Remilia that they will see each other again one day. Nosferatu saw Lyle. Remilia was crying. She was talking about some wishes. The Holy Land Church has named Lyle a hero. Alice was told that everything would be fine, and no matter how much time passes, she will wait. And one day it will happen. Yuki was lying on the bed. Birds chirped outside the window. He jumped up. He was having a dream about the distant past, but then it wasn't his memories that went away. What happened to Lyle, Remilia, and Alice after his death? I kept thinking. He doesn't have a single idea. He has no idea why he was able to be reborn. There is no point in tormenting yourself with these questions, and he hopes to find out what happened to Lyle and the others when he goes to the capital. It's been a month since the Magic Guild exam. Yuki is busy right now. He had to study the materials sent by the princess about the guild, about the conditions of the reception ceremony, the booklet about the informational lecture, and separately he had to study the manual on the duties of a close knight himself. He thought about how complicated the rules and regulations of people were. If Martha hadn't helped, he would never have made it to the deadline. And all the free time was spent on Rumia, who asked to play with him. My father could hear his children's loud exclamations outside the window, and grinned. Yuki fell to the ground, exhausted from such games. A month passed in the blink of an eye, and tomorrow is the day of departure to the capital. The day of Yuki's departure arrived. It's time for goodbyes. The priest wished him success in the capital. Zeros is confident that his younger brother can handle it. Yuki thanked him. Rumia asked them to take care of themselves and write them letters. Her Highness wants him as her knight, but he shouldn't be too cocky. The priest advises to treat higher-ranking personnel with respect, and we must not forget that he comes from a young baronial family. Yuki will take it in his stride. During this period, many offspring from aristocratic families go to the capital, and therefore my father told him about high society, and asks his son not to forget about manners when meeting. Yuki thinks that this was a completely unnecessary concern from father. Now, other aristocrats know about it. He doesn't see anything good in it. Zeros asked Martha to take good care of her younger brother. Martha said that she had never liked Zeros because of his harsh attitude towards Mr. Yuka. As always, she doesn't stand on ceremony with Zeros. Her master is Lord Yuki, not Zeros. He knows and wants to apologize. From now on, they plan to support Yuki as a family. At the very least, she should believe those words. Martha understood, and she doesn't have to worry about her mother. He would take full care of her. Martha wants to thank him for his concern. Now she can follow Mr. Yuki with peace of mind. Rumia hopes that they will meet again, and she will be able to come visit her brother. Yuki explains that there is a vacation. They will have the opportunity to meet. Martha suggests that Rumia come to the capital, although the journey will take 15 days. It's time for him to go. Yuki takes one last look at her family, and his family is on top of him. If you think about it, this is the first time someone has seen him off like this. In a previous life, they only drove with a pitchfork in their hands. And since he settled in the village of Feyre, he almost never left the castle. So people in this way accompany their family on the road. Yuki bids them farewell, but he's talking some nonsense. Zeros looked at Yuki. This is his home, Zeros explains. If something happens, he can always return to it. He adds, my lord, my father doesn't understand what Zeros is saying. Yuki explained everything about his past life. It's their secret now. Yuki chuckled and punched Zeros. These people are still incomprehensible creatures to Yuki. Yuki and Marta left. The cart tapped softly. Yuki mentally said goodbye to the Grosseria family. Dick thinks how wonderful the master's blood is. Even during the day, it can fly. He tells Gale and Neil to keep up. Martha never thought that she would ever go to the capital. Yuki apologized to her for pulling her along. Martha said nothing. She's his partner. Who would have thought that young Master Yuki would be chosen as the knight of Her Highness Princess herself? And the task of delivering it will fall on the shoulders of an ordinary servant of the House of Grosseria. This is a great honor for the cart driver. Yuki asks him to stop crying and call him that, and Martha calls him that again. They stopped. The Lashadis were eating grass. Yuki and Marta were resting, and then they were on their way again. They arrived at the hotel. A bonfire was lit. We had dinner, and then we went to bed. Morning came, and off we go again. Yuki noticed that the cart was slowing down. The cart driver apologized to Mr. Yuki and Maruchka. Martha liked what they called her. Yuki doesn't understand what's wrong with that, and she glared at him. The carriage ahead doesn't move at all, and he doesn't even know what to do. Yuki thought about it. Then he turned to Dick. He was right there. Yuki suggested that he quickly fly over and check out what had happened there. Dick started toward it. Meanwhile, Yuki and Marta were watching him. Yuki coughed. He explains that it was his familiar, Dick, and then there's Neil and Gale. Martha noticed that he had unusual friends. Yuki thought that she would be surprised. Martha says Yuki has always been extraordinary. Besides, I've surprised you so much since I was a kid that I can't go anywhere else. Dick was back. He says the road is clear, but that carriage is moving slowly. There's a big procession of carriages with soldiers. Dick says there are 3 carriages and a lot of soldiers. Yuki is convinced, however, that there is a large procession, and he thinks about who owns the carriages. Dick had seen the wyvern crest. Yuki asked Martha if she knew whose coat of arms it was. Martha thinks it might be the coat of arms of a marquis, or rather a duke. The wyvern is depicted on the coat of arms of the ducal house of Slay. This is an old aristocratic house. It would be impermissible rudeness to overtake the procession of a representative of such a pedigree. Martha and Yuki noticed. The carriage stopped. Yuki asked if Marta remembered what her father had said before they left. He blurted it out to the other nobles. Yuki wondered what he had said about him. Martha thinks that what an outstanding son Yuki is. They exchanged glances. He's got a damn bad feeling about this. The carriage door ahead swung open. Yuki will meet them, and he asks Martha to help him put his appearance in order. Martha ran to the suitcase. I opened it. I tightened my tie. Yuki put on his jacket. Martha brushed her hair. She put the comb away. Yuki praised Marta. The cart driver said what a well-coordinated work. They were like a married couple who had been living soul to soul for many years. Yuki said they were partners. He decided to go meet the strangers. He bowed and felt honored to see a member of the Duke of Slay's family standing before him. Yuki wants to introduce herself, and dares to suggest any business to him. Once you stopped your carriage in such a place. A soldier announces, Her Excellency Madame Odette to deliver the words to the Baron's bastard. He should humbly accept alms with his head bowed in gratitude. Yuki decided that in that case, he would not refuse this charity. The soldiers looked at him in surprise. Yuki realized that he had reflexively declined. Perhaps, in the human world, this is a great piece of luck. Hence, responsibility must be borne accordingly. And he says it's too much of an honor for a bastard from a baronial family. If he accepts it, he will spend his luck for the rest of his life. He has no right to decide on such an important issue alone. First of all, you need to write a letter to your father and find out if he can get something grandiose. Therefore, he is forced to give up at the moment. As far as he knows, in such situations, you must wait with your head bowed until the person of the upper class has left, like people with hemorrhoids. The lady apologizes for the impoliteness of her guards, and he gets out of the carriage. The lady was wearing a gorgeous dress. She smiled at Yuka. Yuki stood there and didn't move. He was very surprised. I appreciated the lady's dress. Rumia would be absolutely thrilled if she saw such a thing, but their family can't afford it. She stopped the carriage because she had a proposition for him. This case concerned Yuki, and the knight's position. The lady is talking about Princess Iris. The girl was crying hard. Another took her hand and told her not to cry. It's nonsense that it differs from others physiologically. Iris is her precious friend. Iris looked up at Odette. She would protect it, and when she grew up, she would be its knight. Yuki understood that this was about the position of Her Highness Knight. Yuka also knows that Her Highness can appoint her own knight. Iris had told him so personally. I asked him if he knew that there were 4 candidates for this position. Yuki was surprised. Odette explains that no one will allow Her Highness to choose a knight without permission. Yuki remembers what the princess said. It is a great honor for the nobility to become a princess knight. It turns out that she can't even choose the person who will protect her. Most likely, she was the victim of political games between influential nobles. There are 3 other candidates besides him, and as he correctly understood, the lady is also one of them. Odette confirms this. The soldier said he finally got it, calling him the Baron's pathetic bastard. He keeps telling Yuki to be disgraced, and he should immediately give up the position of Her Highness Knight. Only one person deserves this honor, Mrs. Odette Slay. Yuki gave him a strange look. Odette turned on the soldier, who was talking nonsense. She will achieve what she wants on her own, and demands that he go back on his words. The soldier bowed and apologized to the lady. Yuki watched with surprised eyes. The lady ordered the guards to get this fool out of her sight. Odette sighed. She was very angry. He apologizes to Yuki for seeing this disgrace. She has a simple suggestion for him. Yuki listened to her carefully. She offers to cooperate, and he thinks that the other 2 candidates have already formed an alliance. If he teamed up with her, their chances would be even. Yuki doesn't understand how she can be so sure that the remaining candidates have joined forces. The lady said it was confirmed by her people. According to it, representatives of the Marquis and Count families united. Yuki was thinking that only one person could be Her Highness's knight. It turns out that after defeating the other 2, they will arrange a final battle among themselves. Yuki thinks fast. Of course, the victory will be hers. But don't worry. Even after winning, she would accept him as an ally. In other words, his family will gain the protection of the ducal house. Yuki wants to think for a bit. There will be a special examination for the selection of Her Highness Knight in the capital. Before it starts, he must give his answer. Yuki has to decide before arriving in the capital, and offers to temporarily conclude a cooperation pact, namely, not to be hostile. If you have any problems, give us a helping hand. This way, they will be able to better understand each other's abilities. Odette appreciated it. It wasn't a bad idea. Yuki is happy. I was about to leave. The lady stopped him. She has a question for him. He single-handedly defeated a griffin summoned by a tutor named Cockle, and asks him if it's true or not. Yuki's mouth dropped open in surprise. Yuki asked who said such nonsense. The lady replied that his father had told him about it, and he claims that he is not alone, but together with Her Highness and other knights. Odette exclaimed in surprise. She was surprised when she found out. Yuki apologized that there were some strange rumors about him. To defeat such a terrifying monster alone is an inhumane feat, and he claims to be an ordinary person. Odette said it was such an allegory. It creates the impression of a promising partner. She hopes for a successful cooperation. It was mutual. The carriage moved. The girl in the carriage asked the lady what impression Yuki had left on them. She replied an opponent that you should not let down your guard against. Absolutely not inferior in the face of a member of the ducal house, able to quickly assess the situation and make a decision. There were a few guards on her side, but he remained unperturbed. This means that it hides not inferior combat power. The girl asked her if it was a rumor that he had slain the griffin alone. Odette said no. Her father bribed one of Her Highness's knights who were stationed there. According to his information, there were indeed other knights at the scene of the incident, but Yuki defeated the griffon alone. But he doesn't talk about this valiant feat at all. It was as if he wasn't interested in the position of Her Highness's knight. The girl again asks if there is an aristocrat in nature who is not interested in such an honor. The lady said no. Her Highness's knight is the person closest to her in the magic guild. He would be learning the arcane arts together with Her Highness, probably from a top-level sorcerer. The girl said that the future prospects of guild trainees are determined depending on the wizard who will teach them magic. In any case, it would be unwise to antagonize this mysterious person, for her own purpose and the well-being of Her Highness Iris. Yuki's carriage continued on its way. Martha asked if he would cooperate with the lady of the ducal house. Yuki will be there. By teaming up with a member of the ducal family, he could easily avoid problems with other aristocrats. This is the best way not to cause unnecessary problems to the priest. Martha appreciated the smart move. Yuyuk thought about it. This is a great chance for a beginner in human knowledge to get better acquainted with an ordinary human aristocrat. By being close to that lady, he would be able to integrate into the human society of the Magic Guild without any problems. But to do this, he must demonstrate that he is worthy of work. Dick turned to his master. He detected the enemy using ultrasonic waves. There are monsters ahead. There are dark wolves down the road. Looks like they're waiting for a carriage. There are beeps coming from Yuki's carriage. The carriage recognized this signal of encountering monsters. Yuki is going to take a look. The cart driver sees no reason to go. Martha advises you to be careful. The wagon stopped. The soldiers don't see any monsters anywhere. Yuki only caused a commotion. If he found the monsters, he must first show them their exact position. 3 dark wolves are directly ahead. It is a 10-minute carriage right away. However, this is a red herring. The main pack lurks on the sides, planning to attack while they are distracted by the monsters ahead. You can't see them because they're hidden in the grass. The soldiers stared at Yuki in disbelief. Odette gets out of the carriage and agrees with Yuki. They also detected the presence of monsters. The lady introduced her tutor. The tutor said that he was faster than her familiar. Yuki thought that she was a sorceress, since she had a staff in her hands. She only determined that there were 3 groups of monsters. It doesn't compare to the detail of his information. Reveal even the enemy's position how smart Yuki's familiar is. Dick was glad to be praised. The lady with the dark wolves can easily master her ancient magic, and the guards must be ready to meet the enemy at the front. And Yuki will set up a diversion. He thought about it, and he wants to ask a question. He is curious to know how long it takes an ordinary aristocrat to kill monsters, and he thinks it will take about an hour. Odette thought that he was questioning her powers and that he couldn't handle some dark wolves. He just wanted to know how things were going for the average magic-wielding noble. The lady says that for a true aristocrat, even 10 minutes will be enough to destroy the dark wolves. And for the Duke, it will be normal to spend no more than 5 minutes. Yuki comes to the conclusion that an ordinary aristocrat takes 10 minutes, and a Duke takes 5 minutes. It will take somewhere in the middle and finish in 7.5 minutes. He drew a sign on the palm of his hand. Yuki thanked him and understood, and now it is being sent. The lady thinks that with such a familiar, he can surely be a good distraction. The lady is surprised that he is personally dispatched and not a familiar. I was even more surprised when I saw his speed. Yuki thinks about 7.5 minutes to kill the dark wolves. Modern aristocrats never cease to amaze. 200 years ago, things were different. It took the locals from the village of Farah about 20 minutes to completely destroy a pack of dark wolves. Yuki thinks about showing a little bit of what he can, so that he can continue to safely pretend to be human. He asked Dick to report the exact location of the enemy. The wolves moved quietly in the grass. They were almost peeking out from under her. Yuki was moving fast enough. He saw a goal in front of him, and he was getting closer to her, and attacked him with a blade. The other wolves turned around. Yuki killed one. The wolves were angry. Yuki uses ancient magic and makes an ifrit kick, what the wolves fly away from. The lady is horrified by the powerful magic he uses in battle and thinks she doesn't want to admit it, but thanks to Yuki injuring them, they managed to deal with them a lot easier. But neither did she. Use the power of the earth. The wolves began to retreat, but it was too late. Yuki saw the power of the lady. It was powerful. Yuki praised the bats that they did well too. He goes to fight the dark wolves on the other side of the road. Dick says they're on the run. They were caught off guard by the fire attacks, and when they realized that they couldn't win, they ran. Yuki thought that the lady might be disappointed with him, that he had missed out on his enemies. 7.5 minutes will soon pass. The wolves were running. The bats were chasing them. Yuki did everything quickly, so that the wolves then noticed. They were badly injured and lay down on the ground. Yuki was catching up with them and killed them. Dick announced that the enemy was in a panic, and he found something unusual. Yuki apologizes profoundly to the lady. It took him more than 10 minutes to destroy the dark wolves. He is ashamed in front of a representative of the ducal house, who can easily get rid of these monsters in 5 minutes after detection. Yuki could hear the soldiers talking behind him. He deserves to be told that, because he spent so much time. Odette looked at him. If she considers him unworthy after such a failure, then she can safely break off cooperation. He had no right to judge her. She asked him if he remembered what she said. It seems that a member of the Duke family alone will completely destroy the entire pack of monsters in 5 minutes after detection. It looks like she didn't explain it well. A member of the ducal house can deal with monsters after engaging them in battle in 5 minutes. Yuki was horrified, and I realized that there was an error. It is physically impossible for a human to defeat all monsters within 5 minutes of detection. Even 10 minutes is not normal. Yuki apologized to the lady, who is not familiar with the common sense of the city's nobles. Yuki thought that this lady was a surprisingly nice person. After all, she hadn't been too lazy to point out his mistake, and it seems that she was wrong in her assessment of his abilities. I didn't expect him to have such incredible strength. With his capabilities, there's no particular need to form an alliance with her, but he was fully aware that he couldn't do without her help, and asks for an alliance with him. He would be grateful if she taught common sense to a true aristocrat. Offers to work together to become a knight of her highness. Yuki is starting to seriously pique her interest, and she holds out her hand in return. A sound came from Yuyuk's direction. He'd forgotten all about her. This creature showed its ear. Odette was pleasantly surprised. She saw a beautiful fox. When Yuki killed the wolves, he saw a fox. The dark wolves were her family. Yuki thought that she didn't have anyone else to rely on. And the fox jumped into his arms, and she bit him. He found it during the destruction of the dark wolves. It seems to be the cub of a pair of foxes that lived in this area. The adults were killed by wolves. Yuki stroked the crying fox. Odette thought with horror that they had been attacked. Most likely, they were passing near the site of a battle between wolves and foxes. Immediately after the foxes were killed, the wolves, drunk with bloodlust, turned their attention to them. The lady noticed that Yuki spoke as if he had seen it, although he only made a suggestion. A cub, but still a wild beast. The lady cautiously stretched out her hand, afraid of being bitten. She had already bitten Yuki, but she immediately apologized, and she promised that without his command, she wouldn't bite anyone else. Yuki looked at the fox with a smile. By the way, her name is Ramai. She will serve as a watchdog for his maidservant while he takes classes at the Magic Guild. Her mentor had said that it was only natural for a wizard to have a familiar. Yuki thanked them for their understanding, and now it's time for them to go. Remy agreed with the host. Yuki wants Lessa to accept his condolences. If their cart had passed a little earlier, her parents might still be alive. Remy started to cry. They returned to the cart. Yuki will introduce her to Martha and the bats, and he'll feed you some more. Remy thanked her master. The preceptor turned to her mistress. She asked about the fox's fur. It was silver. Perhaps this is not a simple fox, but a higher breed, and it is called Silva Bea fox. They can take on human form with the help of magical powers. The lady can't believe it, because everyone knows that such a dog can't be tamed. Many different wizards have tried a variety of ways, but no one has managed to make a representative of this breed their familiar. It takes a huge amount of magical power to acquire a human form. It will be decades before that fox can take on a human form. The lady is sure that this is an ordinary fox with a silver coat. The teacher noticed that it was the fox who was calmly behaving in public. Odette smiled. This is the most common fox. Probably. Lady Odette had underestimated Yuki. As the Baron's bastard, he immediately jumped at the lucrative offer of an alliance. But what an insulting delusion towards him. The highest combat power and a huge speed of thinking. And also, his familiars were also outstanding. It can be said that he is a first-class fighter and a sorcerer at the same time. This means that he will be a reliable ally against other candidates. And after the victory, he will become the most formidable opponent. Therefore, it is necessary to collect as much information about him as possible, while the lady has such an opportunity. She's chanting a spell, and looks. The mentor says that the spell was correctly performed. The mistress summons her earth element familiar, the shadow snake, and the snake slipped through the carriage door. Odette sent her to hide in Yuki's cart. The snake will transmit the voices it hears. One day, she will become an excellent knight of Her Highness Princess Iris. These are small things for her. Yuki sensed that a familiar was climbing into the cart. Ramai must have noticed it, too. He sprayed some of his blood on the sides of the wagon. If someone gets close, Yuki will immediately understand. It's probably Odette, Yuki thought, and he'll go check it out. And in this way, Yuki finds himself in the carriage of Madame Odette. He thinks she summoned him by sending a familiar. The lady pretends that it was intended to be so. Yuki was surprised that the members of the Duke's family used familiars summoned by ancient magic for some small errands. And the lady is trying to think of a reason why she called him. And she said it to find out how great the desire he was striving for was. Does he know that after entering the apprenticeship in the Magic Guild, he will be assigned a wizard mentor? Yuki remembers his older brother mentioning something like that. My lady says that when he is recognized as a full member of the guild, he will have the right to explore the capital of the ancient civilization of Elysium. If you manage to find a new ancient artifact there, it will be awarded an increase in the noble title. Depending on the size of the find, you may even receive a new title. This is the first time Yuki has heard this. It turns out that if he finds an ancient artifact, then Grosseria will turn from a baron's house into a viscount's house, or he can start his own brand new home. And he asked about the house if it was for one generation. The lady confirmed it. With the death of the bearer, both the title and the surrounding lands will be seized by the crown. Yuki began to wonder what would happen if the host didn't die. The lady has no idea. No one considered this option. The idea flashed through his mind to get a title with lands from the kingdom and live there in a measured way. But it looks like he can't. After all, in his case, he may not die at all. And he wants to ask a strange question to the lady. And he asks about an ancient artifact that makes its owner immortal. You don't have to become truly immortal. We need some kind of miracle artifact. Once they own one, people won't be surprised if it suddenly doesn't die after hundreds of years of life. The lady replied that such a thing exists. After all, ancient artifacts are very powerful magical items. He'd like to have one of those. His wish remains unchanged, to know humanity. Also, make sure that Princess Reshia is Alice, and also find out what happened to the village of Farah. He wants to see the result of his achievements, what his decisions and actions led to. The lady understands him. He had put in a lot of effort and time to master the ancient magic, and this effort paid off. Her Highness personally appointed him as a candidate for her knighthood. Therefore, he must see how high he can ascend with his own strength. The desire to know is quite natural. Yuki looked at her in disbelief. That's what he said. He wants to know what heights he can reach with his magic. Now she realized that he didn't care about the situation at all, as well as the fact that he is a worthy opponent. Yuki asked her why she wanted to become a knight. She wants to protect Her Highness Iris, and I'm willing to sacrifice everything to protect her. Yuki was surprised that she said the princess name. The lady realized that she had made a mistake. I became nervous and resigned. Iris is her childhood friend. For certain reasons, Her Highness has a need to immerse herself in the study of magic. She wants to be close to help and protect. Yuki is the first person she shared this with. The lady drooped, and I did it because I lied to him. She didn't send the familiar to summon it, but to find out information about it. But he was a much more outstanding magician than she had expected. Yuki immediately discovered the familiar. Yuki was surprised. He only thought about summoning others to him with bats next time. The mistress told him not to even think about it. The lady apologized to him for lying. She wants to become a knight of Her Highness at all costs. Yuki accepts her apology. After all, he hides his true origin and pretends to be a human. In addition, he perfectly understands the desire to protect dear people at all costs, and he trusts Odette. The lady is pleasantly surprised to hear this. He asks you to make your familiar more visible next time your mistress calls him. The lady can't believe he's going to use familiars for small errands after all. Then she laughed. A smile flickered across her face. She clasped her hands together, and she will pray that he or she will become a knight of Her Highness. The mentor announces that the capital has appeared outside the window. Yuki looked out the window. My lady, too. They arrived in the capital city of Milgalia, and also the entrance to the capital of the ancient civilization of Elysium. Yuki thought of this capital of an ancient civilization. It was she who discovered the Church of the Holy Land. He wonders what's going on in it right now. Yuki was looking at the capital. Princess Iris was drearily waiting for something. I thought of Yuka.
Yuki and Marta arrived at the aristocratic building in the capital of Megalia. They stared at the building in surprise. It will be their dorm. Odette Slay was staying in a nearby dorm. It seems that everyone is allocated a separate hostel. Martha noticed that there were several identical buildings all around. Now you can breathe out a sigh of relief. Now there is no fear of accidentally running into some important aristocrat. The interior is surprisingly spacious. Martha will have a place to turn around with cleaning. She can only clean the rooms they will be using. Martha looked aggressively at her master. From now on, this is his home, which means it should be clean and tidy. In that case, he would prepare an assistant for her. It will be Remy. He appoints her as Martha's apprentice, along with a bodyguard. Yuki asked Marta to turn away. He wanted to talk to Remy. Yuki immediately knew that it was Silva Biofa. Then he asked the fox if it wanted to take on a human form. Remy doesn't know, but her body feels itchy. Yuki will share some magic power with her. By giving her a drink of Remy, he can give her enough power to transform. The fox turned into a girl. Yuki looks proudly at his creation. Remy sees her hands. She turned into a human. A judge in human form, and not yet 10 years old. Yuki wonders how long she can last like this. Remy answered it no more than 2 hours. This is her first time. Yuki looked at her status and skills. All Silva Bo Fox initially have the ability to transform people, and thanks to his mystical blood, a few additional skills were added. But her level is small, probably because she's still a child. From now on, he would give her his blood every day, so she should train well with the transformation. Once she was able to transform into a human in a stable manner, she would need to take care of Martha's help and protection. Yuki thought about it. She needs to be bathed first. Yuki gave Martha permission to turn around. Yuki shows a little magic. Martha thinks for a second, and he says it's probably baby Remy. Yuki would like her to be at least a little surprised. Martha says she's very surprised. I just decided not to go along with my master's provocations. Yuki only wanted to find her a helper, nothing more. But that Yuki uses any methods to do this, she is not surprised at all. Martha wrapped Remy in a cloth. Remy will be helping her mentor, and Martha has to take care of her. She'll take good care of her. Yuki will go warm up the tub and wash Remy, but Martha says she can handle it on her own. Yuki wouldn't want to give her too much trouble. Yuki took the tree and put it in the fire. Dikara. And he says that a visitor has come to see him. Some guy in expensive clothes. The man apologized for having to disturb him immediately upon arrival in the capital. He is the messenger of Her Highness Princess Iris. Tomorrow, Her Highnesses intend to hold a meeting of their knight candidates at the guest palace. Of course, this also applies to him, Mr. Yuki. The man humbly requests to attend this meeting with Mrs. Odette Slay. Yuki took the letter and looked at it. He hadn't seen the princess since the guild exam. I wonder if he'll be able to learn anything new about Alice from her. Odette looked at the paper. The tutor thought it was an invitation from a recent visit from Her Highness Envoy. But it was a letter from my father. She was in such a good mood after talking to Yuki. And this piece of paper ruined everything. Her father writes to her to fulfill the conditions he has set for her to live the free life of a sorcerer. Otherwise, he'll call her back home. Her real duty is to live for this house, and he hopes that she will understand her father's will and return as soon as possible. The preceptor is aware of the conditions set by the Honorable Duke. Conditions for obtaining the rank of a mastering 3 high spells of ancient magic. Conditions for rank: defeat a guild-specified monster. And to get the C rank, you need to completely conquer the 3rd layer of the capital of the ancient civilization of Elysium. If the lady manages to obtain a high-ranked mentor, then under his guidance, she will be allowed to enter Elysium. She could manage her father's terms on her own. Right now, she's more concerned about Her Highness. She promised Iris that she would be there for her all the time, even if he gets old and she stays young. In fact, she doesn't really care what form it takes to protect Iris. She doesn't really want to be a knight herself, just follows her father's will. But there is one but. If the princess has someone she trusts as much as she does, perhaps this is good news for Odette, although she doesn't plan on giving up her seat so easily. A future exam will show whether he is worthy to protect Iris or not. They were brought before Her Highness. First of all, the princess wants to apologize to Yuka. She planned to appoint him as her knight, and ask Odette to accompany her as a friend during her guild training. Odette said sharply that it wasn't Her Highness' fault. Her father forcibly promoted her as a candidate. If it wasn't for him, Yuki would have taken up the position of a knight long ago, just like the princess wanted. Even His Majesty the King couldn't ignore the Duke of Slay's letter of recommendation. Upon reaching the age of 13, each member of the royal family has the right to appoint their own knight. The princess appointed Yuki in front of the knights and that Uncle Bunce as witnesses. All that remained was to get approval from the king or another influential member of the royal family, but the aristocrats intervened. With angry shouts about not allowing a baron's bastard to become a princess knight, they began to push their offspring through. As a result, several candidates were selected from all comers, and an exam was announced to select an approximate knight. Yuki thought that the power-hungry aristocrats wouldn't just let it go anyway. Iris said the issue could have been resolved more easily if she had taken action. However, immediately after her arrival from the barony, Odette began to worry about the princess's health. She just lay there one night with a fever and had strange dreams. When she was already able to act, she was isolated so that she could not send a letter to the esteemed Yuki, under the pretext that he didn't get an unnecessary advantage over other candidates. Everyone knew that he was Iris's chosen one. Since the selection will be carried out under the supervision of His Majesty, it is no longer possible for her to insist on her will. Iris tells Yuka to remember. Even if he doesn't get chosen as a knight, she still wants to have him by her side and give him a better mentor. Yuki bowed and thanked the princess. He will gladly accept this honor. It doesn't matter in what form. If he stayed close to the princess, he could achieve his goal of finding out her connection to Fair Village and the villagers. Iris turned to Odette, and she also wants to say thank you to her. Thanks to her, the princess managed to summon the esteemed Yuki for a chat. Calling out 2 candidates at the same time won't make it look like she's patronizing him alone. Odette is happy to be useful to the princess. She made a bow. Iris irritably told her not to sound like a stranger. She is her precious friend, and she was going to learn from the same mentor as her. This was a surprise for Iris. She noticed that they had become friends. and now he's wondering when they made it. Yuki tells how they accidentally bumped into each other on their way to the capital. Iris was a little surprised. It reminded her of their meeting. The princess considered. Then she asked Odette if this gentleman had saved her from the monsters too. With the princess's permission, Odette wishes to refrain from commenting. Iris now thinks she's right, and he wants to hear from the lady how strong Yuki was. Odette has already repeated more aggressively that she wants to refrain from Iris giggled. Yuki thought that they were really good childhood friends. However, he doubts that there will be another chance to meet the princess in such an informal setting before the exam, and he won't miss the opportunity. And he wants to ask her a question. He starts to list the names of his old acquaintances, Lyle, Remilia, and Alice. And she asks if she has any ancestors with such names. Iris thought about it. She repeated the names. I decided on the name, Alice. She looked at Yuki. She said she only knew names from her grandfather's generation, and among them there is no one with such. Yuki drooped. Iris asked him why he was interested, but Yuki didn't come up with a reason. He said something uncertainly about sleep. The girls looked at him quizzically. More emphatically, he said that the three men had come to him in his sleep last night and had told him to protect Her Highness like the apple of his eye. Iris was thrilled with the story, and now she thinks that their meeting was not accidental, and Yuki was sent to her by these people. Yuki mentally apologized to Lyle for the blizzard. As time goes by, he'll visit his grave, so Lyle shouldn't hold a grudge against him. Iris is delighted that this can be a fateful meeting. Unfortunately, there are no records of her ancestry going back to her grandfather's generation. Even if the named persons are her ancestors, there is no way to verify this now. Odette asked if it was because of the War of the Eight Kings. Yuki remembered that this war was after his death, and he thinks what a stupid thing they've done. Because of this war, almost all important documents and records were lost, as well as ancient artifacts that are either lost or sealed. The princess remembered something. It was about her night assignment exam. It looks like the Magic Guild has already determined the venue. It is on the uppermost layer of Elysium, in the cave where the Holy Sword is imprisoned. She is interrupted. A servant announced the arrival of the Marquise's son, Mr. Gilvan Keels, and a member of the Count's family, Mr. Gilles Wolfgang, and he asks me what to tell them. The princess sighed. It looks like the time for socializing as friends is over. And the princess told the servant to let them pass. Once all the candidates have gathered, she will tell you the details of the exam. Everyone in the room was waiting for new guests. The door creaked open, and two gentlemen came in. With a more serious face was the Marquis of Kiel's son. The one with the glasses is Count Wolfgang's son, Gilles. Yuki saw the remaining candidates. Kilza asked the princess what they were seeing. As far as he has heard, the exam should be held in equal conditions for all candidates. And the question is why these two candidates were here before them. And he assures them that the exam is a waste of time. It is obvious to everyone that only one person is worthy of becoming her knight out of all those present. Gilles noticed that he was being too disrespectful. Mr. Gilvan asked him to be quiet. He seems to think he's equal to Kilsa. Gilles replied that he had no intention of doing so. A good example of the influence of social status on relationships. How people love that. Kilza said something else was beyond him, namely the presence of this son of a dog, and points his finger at Yuki. Yuki didn't immediately understand. Kilsa told him to know his place, calling him a dirty bastard. He added that Yuki really thought that he could become a knight of the princess herself by learning a couple of tricks. It's better not to embarrass him. Odette pounced on Kilza. Yuki bowed and thanked him for his concern. Kilza can see that Yuki knows exactly who he is. Yuki, of course, understands. He's a real Nosferatu monster, and he can't become a man. He'll probably have a very long life ahead of him. 200 or even 300 years or more. And in all this long life, the commotion of joining a human guild is an isolated event that will quickly become a fleeting memory of the past. Yuki straightened up. Kilzia looked down on him. Yuki said that he understood very well and that it wouldn't take long to communicate with him. And that very soon it will become a fleeting memory. Kilsa was startled. Kilsa drew back a little from his surprise. He was trying to figure out what the bastard had said to him. Yuki continued to say in the same tone that he had no intention of withdrawing from the exam. Sooner or later, it will become one of the warm memories of the past. Kilza thought that Yuki was trying to say that he would embarrass himself in front of everyone. Yuki didn't hear him. He asked the princess to tell him the details of the exam. Jill tried to calm Kilsa down. Odette knew that Yuki was still a fruit. The exam itself was determined by the Magic Guild. Do they know that this city is the entrance to the capital of the ancient magical civilization of Elysium? Jill had heard of a special passageway that was only available to guild members. This city was originally built for the purpose of running Elysium, so the guild decided to hold the exam in the ancient capital. Kilzia elbowed Keel, unable to speak. The princess gave the cards. Their task is to inspect the marked cave on the map. It is located on the upper layer of the ancient capital. The guild received a report that undead were spotted there. They need to check if the holy sword in the depths of that cave is intact. The first person to reach the holy sword will become a knight of Princess Airs. Yuki remembers how 200 years ago he was also killed by the so-called holy sword. And I thought, what an abomination that was. Due to such a death in his previous life, he is now allergic to long swords. With short ones, it's still tolerable. Odette wants to ask a question, and he wonders what will happen if two candidates reach the sword at the same time. Iris explains that, in this case, an additional exam will be held, the final. If the two of them manage to agree among themselves, one will become her knight, and the other will receive an equally significant position. Odette thanked the princess for her explanation. Yuki thought to himself that it was the lady asking for cooperation. It turns out that even if they join forces and achieve the goal together, there will be no problem. They will learn the rest of the details directly from the examiner. The exam will be held in 3 days. They need to prepare for this time. The princess wishes everyone good luck. Yuki is back. Martha and Remy met him. Yuki saw how beautifully Remy was dressed up and asked if she was behaving well. Remy said, "Okay." Martha said little Remy was an incredible girl. She had already learned how to put things together. Remy yawned. She was sleepy, even though she had been sleeping during the day. This is not surprising, since she is still a child. Martha told her to go to bed if she really wanted to sleep. Remy said she was the Overlord's familiar. Remy turned back into a fox. Yuki orders her to go to bed, and she fell asleep. Martha asked about Yuki's exam. He was told to explore the undead cave. Martha sighed. It would be hard for him. He can't stand this stuff. Martha remembers when Yuki and Rumia went to the cemetery to visit the grave. The undead came from everywhere. Martha is worried about Yuki. He doesn't need to work too hard. Yuki said he would. For Martha, no matter what the outcome is, she will always stay by Yuki's side. And by the way, today in the capital's market, they were selling cheap good honey. So Martha made Yuki's favorite pancakes. Yuki's eyes lit up. And he will ask you to do it again tomorrow, so that he will go to the exam in a good mood. The day of the exam came. They were welcomed to the Linbell Magic Guild. The guild's main building is located there. The rest of the buildings are research laboratories and more. Yuki suddenly saw General Bunce standing in front of him. They haven't seen each other for a long time. Bunce apologized for what had happened. He and Her Highness only recommended Yuki. Most likely, this did not suit the other aristocrats. Even if they chose someone else, they wouldn't forget about Yuki. They will not leave their savior in the lurch. Bunce gives the knight's word. Yuki thought that Bunce was a good person. They stopped. Bunce announced that they were here. This is the entrance to the capital of the ancient civilization of Elysium. A C-rank examiner, Demeter, was standing near the entrance, and she said that they would go through this door to Elite. They need to be careful when entering. The gate opened in front of them. A distorted space awaits them. This is the only passage that leads to the capital of an ancient civilization. Bunce recommends closing your eyes and holding on to the accompanying guard during the descent. Demeter and Bunce began to descend. Yuki stepped onto the stairs, and I began to experience strange sensations. They go down, but it seems as if they are rising. They seem to be moving straight, but they seem to be moving obliquely. Just from the last life constantly flew in the sky, and so I got used to such feelings. And everyone else will eventually get used to it. However, who would have thought that he would ever make it to Elysium? 200 years ago, it was completely under the control of the Holy Land Church, and anyone who came close was going to die. The place must be unpleasant for him. But just the thought that these are the ruins of a mysterious ancient civilization, the heart immediately starts pounding faster. And he thought that his sorceress guts were hopeless. Bunce said they were almost there. Yuki and Odette were surprised to see. In front of them was an underground maze. Yuki and Odette looked at him. Bunce went on to say that this maze was discovered 220 years ago, but still hasn't been fully explored. They, the trainees, are only allowed to descend to the upper layers. If they try to go lower, they will not be able to guarantee the safety of their lives. Kilsa was once again furious at being spoken to in the wrong way. He is the heir to the title of Marquis, and even a general is not allowed to behave like. They need to follow him who is still able to. Bunce noticed that Yuki was fine. He was surprised at his self-control. Yuki was helping Odette, who was very ill. Demeter will explain while they are unable to move, and she took off her hood. As they might have already been notified, the undead appeared in the cave. Varieties, lower ghosts and skeletons. The skeletons on this layer are very weak, and the ghosts are not capable of becoming a serious threat. But if they still feel a danger to their lives, they should immediately run to the exit. At the entrance, there are amulets that scare away monsters. If they are rested, then they can move on. Yuki saw the Holy Sword Cave for the first time. Demeter will tell them again if they feel they can't handle it. They need to give up immediately. New trainees are taken to explore this layer, but they are still in ancient ruins teeming with dangerous monsters. Therefore, the risk of losing your life remains. They need to remember her warning. Kilsa is at it again. He took it as a threat to the representative of the Marquis' house. If he's so confident in his abilities, then he might try wandering around alone. Even in these corridors, monsters sometimes appear. If he falls into a hole in the center, in the middle of a battle, he will inevitably die. And no one will be able to go to the rescue. Their task now is to reach the Holy Sword. Whoever does it the fastest will become the winner of the exam. They are allowed to use magic freely. Demeter has every. Gilles timidly raised his hand to ask if it was forbidden to try to interfere with the opponents. Demeter replied that it was a matter of course, but they can't keep track of everything. If they get hurt, it will heal them. If they give up, it will help out, but that doesn't help them. Odette asked how they would know that they had reached the Holy Sword. Demeter has sent several familiars to the cave, through whose eyes she will observe their actions. They can also use their familiars, but if they reach the target first, it will not be counted as a victory. Yuki thinks of something to ask, since he's already been asked. If she calls it a holy ball, then it is an important ancient artifact. And he's curious to know why he's sealed in a place like this. Kilsa looked at him reproachfully, as if he might have asked something better. Yuki began to doubt that he had asked the right question. Now that he had the chance, he wanted to ask. Demeter thought about it, and she said the answer was simple. The sword is stored here, as it is completely useless. There are also such ancient artifacts. If he wanted to know more details, he could investigate the matter himself when he became an official guild member. Yuki thanked her for her reply. Demeter thought of him. He's a very curious teenager. While others think only about the exam, he does not dwell on it and looks far ahead. She looked at him appraisingly. It gives them 5 minutes to think about their strategy. They can think things out on their own, or they can team up with someone else and do it together. Demeter encourages them to demonstrate wisdom and skill worthy of a knight of her highness. They can be free. Odette asked Yuki if he had brought a familiar with him. He had no idea what Elysium was like. Summoning her familiar takes a certain amount of time, and yet he can address her as you. They are equal partners until they reach the Holy Sword. Polite treatment slows down the speed of information exchange, so Madame Odette was told. He understood her and called her by name. Odette smiled. Now they come up with a plan. The cave in a certain place branches into 2 passages. A direct route, crowded with undead, and a relatively safe detour. Odette wonders which way they should go. Odette has this magic, but can only use it for a short period of time. She also has the spells Shadow Snake and Stone Strike. Their enemies are skeletons and ghosts. That should be enough for them. Odette smiled and tilted her head. And I wanted to add something. If they win, then he can become the Knight of Iris. Yuki didn't understand right now. She once mentioned that she was a childhood friend of Iris. She was bullied by other princesses and princes because of her grandmother's background and a certain reason. Yuki knows about her physiology. The princess herself had told him about it, so Iris trusted him completely. Odette took his hand. She wants Iris to be happy. Therefore, he believes that the position of a knight should be taken only by those who are truly able to protect it. Well, it will be enough for her to be an assistant. Yuki saw that Odette truly cherished Princess Iris. Yuki decided that they would discuss it after winning. For him, the position of a knight is not so important, so he can't just agree to such a request. It's time to go. Odette agrees with Yuki and clenches her hand into a fist. Bunce and Demeter appeared before them. Demeter wants them to fully express themselves. Bunce looked at Yuki. Demeter announces the start of the exam, and all the participants went to the cave. The exam begins. The first thing they did was activate the physical enhancement magic. Demeter thinks it's a sensible move, but the only question is who can do it faster. Yuki drew a symbol on his palm. Odette didn't have time to think. Yuki put her on his back and apologized. They will immediately go off like this. Odette became indignant. She hadn't finished casting the spell yet. Yuki isn't going to wait. How he treated her so unkindly to a lady. Yuki says that during the exam, she is not a lady but a partner, and she would finish the spell on his back. Odette thinks this is absurd. Ahead of them were skeletons. Odette excitedly called out to Yuki. He had seen them too, and knew them, and he drove them out, calling them wicked dead men. The blade touched one of the skeletons, and the skeletons were terrified. They backed away from Yuki. Odette was confused. I didn't understand the reason for the skeleton's retreat. Yuki explains that the undead hate silver weapons. It was a joke. In fact, his mystical blood is rubbed on the blade of the sword. Odette realizes that the undead don't usually react so harshly. His mystical blood has the ability to purify. Therefore, any evil spirits are cleansed upon contact. Eyewitnesses have built a logical chain. The undead are afraid of him, which means that he commands the undead. So he got a new nickname. The Vampire Lord. Such are the cases. The skeletons looked at Yuki in fear. Yuki threatened one with his sword, and the skeleton twitched. Yuki told Odette to hold on tight. Meanwhile, Bunce and Demeter were standing by the cave. Bunce was thinking of the capital of an ancient magical civilization. He had heard that the remnants of the Temple of Elysium were hidden in the depths of these halls, while they only explored the upper layers. It can take hundreds of years to fully explore these ruins. They're in the middle of an exam, and Demeter asks him to refrain from talking too much. Bunce apologizes. He gets tired of waiting in silence. Bunce asks Demeter if she knows that the undead spirit of a priest of the Temple of Elysium is roaming in these layers. Demeter knew. This is a meaningless fact. Protective amulets are installed along all corridors. Until someone specifically calls, any evil spirits will remain locked up. Bunce wonders where the undead came from in the Holy Sword Cave back then. Demeter said the cause was being investigated. Bunce asks her if she's sure it's safe to take the exam in a place like this. All the amulets were checked yesterday by the person in charge of them. No problems were identified. Bunce wouldn't have been so sure. These passageways were a battlefield. Many lost their lives here. They wouldn't be surprised if the undead's undead souls appeared. Demeter saw the mist, and I wondered where he came from. It looks like they have their own exam waiting for them too. Suddenly, ghosts appeared in the passageway. Demeter was sure that the amulets had only been tested yesterday. Bunce thinks that a higher undead has appeared, capable of neutralizing the effect of amulets. Bunce sliced the spirit into small pieces with a quick flick of his axe, and he was gone. Unfortunately for them, Bunce has an unusual weapon. Demeter chants a spell, and uses the magic of thorns of the Shadow Realm. Immediately after the end of the War of the Eight Kings, a funeral rite was held here. Right now, for some reason, they have appeared. One of the spirits began to speak. He turned to the enchantress, who was very slow. Their Lord's seventh priest is much faster. Demeter thought about the seventh priest. Bunce doesn't like the lack of feeling of flesh when hitting in a battle with goat. Demeter will check the candidates through the familiar's eyes to make sure they are all right. Yuki and Odette successfully approach the target, so fast that they almost reach the Holy Sword while avoiding the undead completely. Bunce suggests not being too surprised. You can expect anything from this kid. His ancient magic activation speed is also abnormal. She can't believe that a mere trainee has such great power. The second team chose to bypass the undead. Their choice is more sympathetic. Demeter was surprised by something, and he sees that Kilsa and Geel are solving problems. They seem to be at odds with each other. Geel saw the familiar. I walked quickly toward it, and the connection between Dietra and the familiar was cut off. Her familiar was killed. She wouldn't make such a stupid mistake. Her familiar is enhanced with magic and won't fall prey to a normal skeleton so easily. She's got a bad feeling about this. They should also go to the cave. It looks like there's some sort of incident going on. A few minutes earlier, Kilza appreciated Yuki's agility for such a vile bastard of a baron, and he swore. No one had informed him that there was such a person in the baronial family. Tell Jill that they slipped right between the skeletons and the ghosts. Sooner or later, they will fall into the hands of the undead, and there they will end. They were right to choose the safe path. Jill asked Kilsa why he didn't approve of the plan to eliminate Yuki so that he could shoot magic into his back from the shadows. Kilsa remembers Father Gil's plan. Gil says that Yuki will not be able to continue and he will be disqualified. Thus, Odette remains the only opponent. Kilza would have had a much better chance of winning. Kilza thought it was a call to a low deep. His goal is to become a princess knight and make the name of his noble house famous. Forcing him to commit a meanness and then abandon him would only tarnish his name and betray the princess expectations. Gio looked at him. I thought it was a noble thing to do. Kilsa boasts that he was brought up like this from childhood. If you put yourself above others, then you need to be more noble than anyone else. Giel didn't have such high moral values in his family. After all, the Wolfgang family is a bloodline of necromancers, wizards who specialize in manipulating the dead. Kilza says that it brings a lot of benefits, especially in the current situation. He has nothing to be ashamed of, and he relies on heal, and asks you to lead him to the victory of your magic. Giel looked at him, and he will use his ancient magic. A friend of his father's had taught him ancient magic, which was perfect for this situation. According to him, this is magic of the highest level, which must be applied precisely within the limits of Elysium. The battle is an information war, and it begins already at the stage of preparation. By bribing people in the king's service, they got all the information they needed, and that the exam will be held in this place, and that it is overflowing with lower undead. There are several creatures that can control the undead: vampires, liches, and wizards. The Wolfgang Count family is a bloodline of high-ranking necromancers. Among this family, the firstborn Giel stood out especially for his talent for necromancy. The choice of it as a satellite can be called an inevitability. Kilsa knows that Giel is reliable. So be it, he will make him his right-hand man when he becomes minister or vizier. Giel addresses the dead, and he asks them to bow down to his will and slay his enemies. Giel channeled his magic. Kilha looked at him, and he wonders if he did it. I can see the fear in his eyes. Skeletons and ghosts appeared in front of them. Kilza was delighted. Now they can stop Yuki and Odette. Now the victory will be in their hands. Kilsa didn't have time to finish. How Giel had grabbed him by the throat. Giel began to speak, but not in his own voice, to see who had disturbed them, and who once again opened the doors to the world of the living before them. That voice replied that he was the 7th priest of the Elysium Temple. The priest in Giel's body channeled his energy, and Demeter's familiar jumped back, and he was killed. The skeletons were terrified and Kilza wondered if a member of the Temple of Elysium had been walking on the upper layer. Had Giel's magic called him here? Then it's not an easy ghost, a phantom, poltergeist, or even a lich. The priest was asking about the ancient artifact in the Kilzas. He looked into Kilza's eyes, and he lost consciousness. His body fell to the ground. They dedicated their lives to the search. In the name of the Holy Sword, get your hands on it. Yuki and Odette stopped walking. They were in the Holy Sword cave. Bunce and Demeter were rushing to the rescue. It was like the finish line, but it was even a little disconcerting. In front of them was a holy sword. Yuki had imagined it a little differently. It is said that one of the priests feared the power of the holy sword and enclosed it in stone. Since then, no one has been able to pull out the sword and see the blade. Most likely, this is an extremely dangerous ancient artifact. Even high-ranking wizards left it like this, Odette added. She moved closer to Yuki, and she said that the victory in the exam is for them. Odette rejoiced in her victory. If you think about it that way, there's nothing. She just ran and didn't do anything else. The main thing is that the exam is over. Yuki thought that Demeter's familiar must be somewhere nearby. Yuki heard something in front of him. In the depths of the cave, it was getting closer. It looked like their opponents were here, Odette thought. Odette was about to tell them that they had lost, but Yuki interrupted. Yuki became alert, and Odette noticed. He wondered who it was. It exudes such sinister magical power. Gilles came out of the darkness, and not alone. Odette was surprised that he had such magical power. It was immediately clear who possessed Gilles. He started to speak in a different voice. They are the seventh priest of the Temple of Elysium, Logrul. They responded to the call and came to this world again. Odette didn't believe he would use necromancy magic in a place like this. The priest asked them to get out of the way. Yuki was ready to fight. The priest threw a rock at him. He looked up, and I was surprised. Yuki protected Odette. The priest didn't expect Yuki to withstand his attack. Yuki told him not to annoy the living. Kakao also tried to summon the same type of ancient magic, but it didn't work out then. It was said that the priests of the Holy Land Church were killed within the capital of an ancient civilization. Yuki wouldn't be surprised if their souls were left wandering in these halls. He wonders why Gilles has summoned such a dangerous soul. Could it have been an accident, or on someone's orders? The members of the Holy Land Church had chased him to death in his previous life, and he's one of those scoundrels, right in front of Yuki. Yuki was startled when he heard someone yell, "Don't go near him!" Bunce excitedly asked Yuki and Odette if they were all right. Demeter ordered the general to eliminate the surrounding undead, and she would stop the possessed ghost. Demeter began to chant a spell. The priest looked at them. Then he thought about it. Demeter had told him not to go near her charges, and she used the magic of thorns of the Shadow Realm. It seemed so stupid to the spirit, and he just created a barrier that protected him from Demeter's attack. Demeter exclaimed. The spirit said how low the magic of this era had fallen. Slow in power is no good. Truly only they, the chosen of the Temple of Elysium, are worthy to command the force. The spirit used magic. Bunce and Demeter felt a surge of energy. Yuki and Odette also ducked down. The spirit gathered all its strength. He pointed it at the ceiling of the cave. The cave began to crumble. Bunce and Demeter were suspended from their chart and wondering what the spirit was going to do with their trainees. The spirit said they didn't care about the living. Their desire is one thing: to return the stolen ancient artifact and guide humanity to new heights. Yuki approached the spirit with incredible speed and cut off its arm. He wants to silence him. The priest's spirit didn't know when this brat had gotten close to him, and he saw that Yuki might hurt him. Yuki had a silver weapon. However, it's pointless for Yuki to do anything when the great seventh priest is in front of him. Yuki used the purification magic. The spirit wants to know who it is. Yuki called him pathetic. First they branded others as monsters and oppressed them, and now they have sunk to such a low level. Yuki told him to shut up and finally rot while attacking the spirit. The spirit called him an impudent brat. Yuki protected himself from the shrapnel. Odette became concerned for Yuki, but he was fine and told her to be ready. The spirit taunts him. Yuki uses the purification magic again. Gilles shuddered, and the spirit began to let out a wild roar. Gilles was released and began to fall. Yuki saved Gilles, and he told Odette to take a deep breath. Odette drew a symbol, activating her magic, and it uses the power of the earth. He looked at Yuki, not understanding what was going on. Disembodied ghosts take over bodies to gain the magical power of the living. After losing Gilles, he has nothing else to feed on. The spirit was wondering how such a young guy could gain such power. It lasted 200 years in the form of a ghost and descended to this. Even the tongue should not turn to stutter about new heights. They started a war and lost it, and in the end, people like him have fallen to the state of pathetic ghosts and seized the bodies of innocent children. Yuki feels sorry for those who lost their lives because of such losers. The spirit began to weaken. His magic power is running out. He demanded to give them the holy sword. After regaining the holy sword, they would finally be able to ascend and gain a new life. Odette doesn't understand what he's saying. Sealed here is a holy sword designed to destroy unholy creatures. It's hard to believe that an evil ghost will be eager to get such an artifact. Perhaps there is another secret hidden in the holy vault. Yuki has become curious himself and wants to check it out. Odette says we can't get him out. She said the sword was sealed. Yuki looked at the sword. He took hold of the hilt, and unexpectedly for him, he felt the sword greet him. Yuki pulls him out of the ground. He glanced at the sword and used erosion hacking. The sword hissed. Yuki understood. This is the holy sword that killed him. The spirit was surprised. Odette was equally startled. Yuki has learned a lot of interesting things through hacking, but first he needs to finish the case. The spirit was angry, and a portion of the spirit's flesh was cut off. The sword was light. But 200 years ago, Lyle's hand was shaking when he pointed the blade at Yuki. This moment was in Yuki's mind. He mentally apologized to his son Lyle. He caused so many unpleasant emotions to be experienced by committing an unwelcome act. He's curious to know what happened to them if he had a fight with Remilia and Alice over Yuki. They always made him look like a hero there. Yuki doubts that the bastards from the Holy Land Church would dare to kill. He will continue to hope that they have found their happiness now and forever. The spirit was thinking about its missions to find a new life for them and their companion. Yuki confidently appeared in front of him. So Yuki asked him if he knew Lyle from Feyre village. The spirit said he didn't know. Yuki doubts the spirit's words and thinks that he was hurting his loved one. But the spirit claims that no one gave such orders. Yuki heard him, and there's nothing else to do with it. And the spirit was gone. The holy sword was indeed sealed, right after they slaughtered a monster 200 years ago. Without even clearing it of the monster's blood, that holy sword called out to him as soon as he pulled it out of the stone. It looks like it's been completely soaked in his blood for a long time, and now only he can use it. Although not. There is another owner. Odette pounced on him. How dare he just pull out his sword like that? Yuki looked at her, and I tried to get it back. He just thought they'd scold him if they found out he'd used it without permission. Odette says that doesn't mean you have to put it back in right away. There was an emergency situation. No one would dare complain. More importantly, he was able to use an ancient artifact that could not even be pulled out of the stone for 200 years. This is a great achievement. Everyone will want to know how they did it. Yuki motioned for her to stop talking. This will be their secret. Odette looked at him strangely, and once again repeated a secret. And again, Odette understood. She won't spill her partner's secrets. From under the rubble, Bunce and Demeter asked their charges if they were all right. They're about to break through these rocks. They'll need to step back a bit. Yuki wonders why Jiel was able to summon a priest of the Holy Land Church. However, this will come to light in the guild's further investigate, destroying the sinister soul and giving the reincarnation effect to the righteous soul. But the reincarnation ability is already all used up. It turns out that he destroyed the priest of the Holy Land Church and reincarnated a monster like him, and he thinks what a shoddy system it is. So he was reborn because of the Holy Sword's ability, and also he used hacking. The first time, he was in a hurry and did not notice that the sword had a history of owner. The temporary owner of this sword is Alice Carmine, used 199 years ago, successfully reincarnated in the same era as the Lord. It happened a few months ago in the village of the baronial possessions of Gloucester. Martha asked her mother how she was feeling. Her mother felt good and was grateful for her daughter's care. Recently, even the cough disappeared. Mom constantly starts to overwork, making Martha worry. But her mother is getting better every time Mr. Yuki visits. Martha had no doubt. Yuki does something suspicious and leaves. However, it had been 5 years since she started working at the Baron's mansion. Her mother asks her what Martha is going to do next. Martha looked thoughtful, and I thought that Mr. Yuki is not the heir. This means that he will soon enter an academy and leave home. There is no guarantee that he will be able to take her servants with him. So Martha should think about finding a new job, or even find a lover and get married. Martha looked at her mother. She lowered her head. Martha wants to continue taking care of Mr. Yuki. Her mother patted her on the head, and she said Martha didn't have to worry about her. Martha thought to herself that Mr. Yuki was an amazing and extraordinary person. Surely it will have a corresponding future. He wonders if she can always follow him. Demeter thought so. The protective amulets were damaged. This was an unexpected turn for Yuki. He became the princess's knight. In his righteous anger towards that dead priest, Yuki had completely forgotten that they had arrived at the ancient capital for the examination. Odette shouts to Yuki that he should become Princess Iris Knight. After all, it was thanks to him that he managed to be the first to pass the exam and even defeat the ghost priest. Yuki thought that maybe she would become a knight, but she wasn't that proud, and she wasn't going to take credit for it. Odette promised that she would keep it a secret that he drew the sword. He'll have to accept it. On the holy sword blade were his blood and someone close to him by nature, based on the history of using the sword 199 years ago. Yuki isn't sure if Alice knew about the holy sword's abilities, but with it, she was reborn in the same era as him, dying in exactly the same way as him. Yuki thought about it, and I realized that what a problem his children are. He has no idea what happened after he died. So Alice is also living in this world with him right now. Yuki will find her. It doesn't matter who she was reborn into in this era. He would find her. He'll see. But there's something I need to do first. He walked over to Kilsa. He flinched when Yuki spoke to him. He asks Kilsa to give him some time. He would like to ask about the undead that attacked them. As Yuki understands, their plan was to incite the undead to hinder his team's progress in the exam. Kilsa confirmed this, but they didn't plan on summoning the ghost priest of the Elysium Temple. Kilsa doesn't lie. Gilles didn't know what he was doing either. He only mentioned that he had learned a special ancient magic from a friend of his father's. If Kilsa had known this was going to happen, he wouldn't have asked Gilles to do anything. And Yuki not only defeated the ghost priest, but also saved Gilles. Kilsa admits his complete defeat and apologizes for all the insults. But Yuki doesn't care. It would be best to make inquiries about this acquaintance who taught Gilles magic. We also need to find out how many people knew about the location of the exam, who damaged the protective amulets, and encouraged Heil to use such dangerous magic. Yuka is very curious about this. Kilsa thought for a moment. He assumed that Yuki was saying that there were Elysium Temple fanatics around the houses of Marquis Keels and Count Wolfgang. But Yuki doesn't know that. He was just sick of the fact that the minions of that church were causing trouble everywhere. Nothing more. Exactly. Odette came to confirm Yuki's point. Perhaps Kilsa doesn't understand the magnitude of the incident. If Yuki hadn't exorcised the priest's ghost, Gilles might still have been possessed by the undead. Kilsa thought with horror that Gilles might be possessed. His body was used as a source of magical power, and in the end, perhaps even his soul was consumed. They need to find the culprit and give him what he deserves. It doesn't matter if the representatives of the Marquis or Count houses are involved. All they need right now is a lead. Kilsa lowered his head, and he admitted that they were right. Kilsa left. Odette said it was time for them to return to the surface too, and then report the incident to Her Highness without hiding any. Clearing up the incident with finding the culprit Yuki will leave to the Magic Guild. Something else is more important to him right now. Search for the reborn Alice. The princess has already been informed. She put down her cup. Yuki was the first to complete the exam. Of course, she knows about the ghost incident too. They did a brilliant job. Odette couldn't do anything, and she said that it was entirely Yuki's fault. Without Odette's help, it would have taken her long. Yuki said that it was thanks to Odette that Gilles was saved. The lady turned on him indignantly. If he hadn't chased the ghost out of Heil's body, Odette wouldn't have been able to attack him with magic. During the exam, they were in an equal partnership. So Odette deserves as much credit as Yuki. Odette called him a stubborn man, and Yuki said that she was the one who was not inferior to him. They stopped and looked at the princess. Iris can see that they have become very close friends. Odette says that Yuki is now her knight. The princess says not quite. He would become her knight after performing a ceremony where his father would personally appoint him. Anyway, this time the most important report came from them, namely, that Yuki drew the holy sword. Who would doubt? Regarding this, Yuki plans to once again draw the sword in the presence of the princess, so that she can make a decision on what to do with it next. However, he would not want to make this fact public. There would surely be discontent among the aristocracy if they found out that the Baron's bastard had acquired an ancient artifact. Iris understood Yuki and decided to keep it a secret. But after she saw the drawing of the holy sword with her own eyes, they would decide whether to study it themselves or gather a special team of researchers to do so. Yuki accepted the princess' order. Iris said he was truly an amazing person. Yuki looked at her. Iris still looks like Alice, although older by 2 years. There are several ways to check if the princess is a reincarnation of Alice. The first is blood. After his rebirth, just like in his previous life, he possessed his own mystical blood. In that case, it's likely that Alice's reincarnation has some trace of the blood that he gave her in her previous life. If Princess Iris is Alice reborn, it is likely that his mystical blood is mixed in her blood, but he couldn't tell her to show her blood to her face. The second method is to let the princess touch the holy ball. Since Alice was reborn with the power of the sword, it will be enough to crack it with erosion during touch to understand. Now it remains to carefully monitor. If she had any memory, she would have reacted in some way when he was talking about his dream and 3 people, and thinks that maybe she's not Alice. Iris asked Yuki what else she could do for him. Yuki shuddered. Odette told him not to look so closely at Her Highness' face. He apologized and said that he was just thinking about his own business. They had only recently arrived in the capital and probably hadn't settled in yet. Iris is sure that they will quickly get used to it. From now on, they will always be at her side as her knight. The princess giggled. Odetta called out to Yuki so that he would at least react to the words properly. As he can see, Her Highness is overjoyed. Yuki appreciated her advice. He did not notice what was necessary, and most importantly, no idea how to do it for him. Yuki takes the knight's oath. He will serve her faithfully and protect her from any threat. Iris grabbed his hand and thanked him. Odette appreciated it and thought that in principle, and so it will do. The princess remembers Yuki telling her that he was told in a dream to protect her. Yuki wonders if this really happened. The princess says it was, and he remembered? If she remembered correctly, he had been visited in a dream by persons named Lyle and Remilia. Yuki was surprised that she mentioned everything. It was a memorable conversation for him, and these people were very dear to him. Iris asks him if that was the case. The princess continued to hold his hand. Yuki said that maybe she was right. Iris asks Yuki to tell. It's interesting for the princess to know. His betrothed wasn't among them by any chance. Yuki said it definitely wasn't. There was an awkward silence. The princess asks him with great interest if there was a dear person to whom he was not indifferent. Yuki looked at Odette, and I thought that the princess was definitely Alice's reincarnation. And right now, she's trying to find out if he has a dear person from his past life. And that means he should cherish her more than anyone else in the world. Iris tries to find out if he can do it or not. Odette is a genius, Yuki thought. Now he understood. And he told the princess that she was the most important person to. Even if he had betrothed or lovers, they were no match for Iris in importance. He is willing to put aside the past and serve solely for the good of the princess. Iris watched him with her mouth hanging open. She frowned. Odette was a little surprised. Odette asked Yuki to leave for a while. They need to talk privately, like a close childhood friend. And Yuki was thrown out of the door. The princess asked Odette to address her as Iris. For Odette, the princess' reaction was a little strange. Yuki became a knight and promised to serve for her good, even putting aside his past. But she doesn't understand why the princess reacted like that. Iris understands everything. And yet, what had come over the princess? As Odette knows, Iris recently went to bed with a high fever, and ever since, the princess began to have strange dreams. In them, she learned to read and write from a great person who lived for a very long time in a huge old castle in one of the villages in the outback. The image of Nosferatu appeared before her. She goes on to say that this person is their guardian angel, whom she has loved since childhood. There is one but. Alice found out about his death. Nosferatu was killed by the holy sword. Alice turned on Lyle, and she was crying really hard. Odette, hearing this, thought that too many specifics for a normal dream. Iris says, that guardian angel of the village, her lord, is very similar to Yuki, and maybe her parents' names in the dream were Lyle and Remilia. So it occurred to her that maybe this wasn't just a dream, but memories from a previous life. Odette denies it, and he confidently says that this is a love disease. Everything is simple here. Iris fell in love with Yuki at first sight. And to give a reason for these feelings, her brain shows such dreams. Iris can't believe it. These are very clear and detailed dreams, like a different reality. But the princess has no evidence to back up her claim. But the princess had them. She tells about a dream where the villagers sent her in a dream. They told her that if she should ever be reunited with their lord in the future, she must find the crest. They would do everything in the village to help her out in the future. One day, Alice should definitely drop in with their lord. If they find something with this coat of arms in reality, this will be the proof, and shows a piece of paper. Odette studies it carefully. She asked me to take a closer look at it. She took the paper. She knows this coat of arms. Odette will immediately arrange a meeting with its owner. Yuki wondered how much longer he could stay outside the door. Yuki was walking down a city street. Odette waved her hand for Yuki to see. She was going to show him a good place. Today, she would take him to the Grail Trading Company. Yuki thanked her for volunteering to show her around the city. Odette said he'd just come out of the country. She informs him that it is important to have contact with major trading companies in the capital, especially for a member of the Magic Guild. who can find a valuable item at any time while diving into some ruins. There will be someone to sell or mortgage. Yuki doubts that she will find anything of value so easily during the dive, said the one who took out the holy sword during his first dive. She had already mentioned once that if you discovered new ancient artifacts, you could raise your aristocratic rank or get a new title. And he's already got that right. Yuki didn't actually find anything. Everyone knew that there was a holy sword in that cave. Odette says no one could have taken it out. If you can't apply it, it means you didn't find it. She wouldn't be surprised if the family rose one step higher in the hierarchy of the aristocracy. And with the growth of rank, there may be a need for connections with influential merchants. And in this case, she decided to take him to the Chamber of Commerce. He left the Holy Sword hanging in the Holy Sword Cave. After thoroughly discussing the possible development options with the princess, they decided to replace it with a fake one at the first opportunity, or at the appropriate time publicly announce that he had managed to remove the seal from it. This is how Odette sees the trading companies in case they choose the second option. He didn't even doubt that she was reliable. Odette was surprised. A country aristocrat like him wouldn't understand such subtleties. Her advice is very helpful. Yuki is so glad that he was lucky enough to meet her. Odette was confused, and she asked him not to make her blush. He only expressed his feelings of gratitude. Odette explains that true aristocrats don't do it that way. Usually they use letters for this purpose, and if they speak directly, then through hints and veiled, and not directly. Looks like she'll have to give him a couple of etiquette lessons, Odette gasped. They saw a carriage. Odette invites Yuka to look at that carriage. This is a special carriage used by members of the royal family for secret trips to the city. Yuki asked, then, how does she know about its existence? Odette says that the ducal house is close to the royal one. Iris gets out of the carriage. Odette can't believe her eyes, and he is surprised. Some incredible coincidence. Yuki begins to suspect them. Bunce is there. He tells Iris that he will come for the princess later. He is sure that with Yuki and Odette around her, she is not in any danger. But still, she had to be careful. Iris apologized for waiting. Odette asks permission to accompany her to the trading company. For Yuki, it seems strange that the princess just wanders around the city. The princess reminds him that she is a member of the Magic Guild and can leave the palace if she sees fit. Her Highness said that she had never visited a trading company herself, and Odette decided to arrange a visit for both of them at once. Iris asks Yuki to address her more informally. He might attract too much attention if he called her Your Highness in public. Yuki heard Iris and tried to say her name. Iris wanted to call him her lord. They looked at each other awkward. This is the most famous grail company in the capital. Yuki's mouth dropped open in surprise. This building was even bigger than their baronial mansion. Branches of this trading company are located throughout the kingdom. Therefore, they can put their money in storage in any of the branches and pick it up in a completely different one. They also have the largest financial turnover with a huge range of different products. Grail also invests in other trading companies. This applies not only to this country. There is something similar in others. They say that any kingdom is easier to break up than the Grail company. So huge and influential. Princess O had heard a lot, but this was the first time she had seen it with her own eyes. Odette says it's no wonder. The royal family made almost no deals with this company. Moreover, no young princess had ever personally visited the company's branch before. That's why she was familiar with this coat of arms. Odette points to it. Iris examines it. Above the door was a sign with a coat of arms. Yuki noticed. The shape of this castle is similar to the one he had in his previous life. Odette approaches the knights and says that she has an appointment with the head of the company. They were aware of their visit. They go inside. They are met with all the honors. Yuki asks her when she managed to arrange a meeting with the main person and what it is for. He thought they were just looking around. Odette says it came out on its own when she said that she would like to discuss an important issue with a senior company official. Yuki doesn't understand what important question she's talking about. Iris apologizes to him. She asked her to. She was interested in the company's coat of arms, and she asked the lady to arrange a meeting with a well-informed person about the origin of the coat of arms. She didn't mention Iris's name. Yuki was impressed by the Duke's house's authority. Their family has been doing business with Grail for a long time and has made many deals. The credo of their family is that it is in peacetime that you need to stock up and prepare for a crisis. She herself had already deposited about 500 gold coins. They were told that they would have to wait a bit. The head of the company would arrive soon. Yuki, holding a cup of tea, looked around the room. There was also a relief of this coat of arms. It reminds him of a bat and a castle. And about him, the times of Dean Nosferatu. Iris apologizes to Yuka for dragging him into all this. She really wanted to make sure that what she saw in the dream was true. She was embarrassed when Yuki asked about her dream. There was a knock, and the girl greeted them. She apologized for waiting. She's the head of the company, Rodelia, and she is glad to see Madame Odette again. Rodelia added, "It is a great honor for her to see Her Highness personally in their company." Iris was surprised that Rodelia recognized her. If she doesn't know the faces of the royal family, then which one is the head of the company? She is immensely happy to meet her personally. Odette says that Rodelia is as perceptive as ever. Today, she brought another friend with her. I introduced Yuki. Yuki said it was nice to meet you. Rodelia had heard about the exploits of Jor Grocery. In a conflict with foreigners from the east, he killed 3 warlords at once. She always wanted to see such a worthy person with her own eyes, at least once. Yuki is surprised that she even knows about his father's military achievements. She has very outstanding knowledge, even at a young age. Yuki doesn't know what he's doing here. Iris asks permission to inquire. If she is the head of a company, then this means that she is the most important person in this organization. Rodelia confirmed it. As far as the princess knows, their company has kept all the records of what happened before the War of the 8 Kings. Unfortunately, Rodelia can't say everything. However, the most important thing is that generations are passed down from one head of the company to another. Iris asks to be listened to, and she said that if Alice Carmine could be reunited with her lords, she would need to find and visit the castle and the Bat Crest. So she was told, once there, they will receive a blessing. Rodelia's face changed. Yuki understands that it was all in Iris' dreams. He wonders who said what, she said. The man who was her father in her dreams. Lyle Carmine and a lot of other villagers. Yuki thought of Lila and Alice, and I understood. He knew it, and that dream. In it, they explained what a blessing is. Lyle will prepare a dowry for her in case she finds a lord in the future. The entire village has a full-fledged dowry earned and passed down from generation to generation. Yuki wondered what they were all thinking. Perhaps Alice should have been married with that dowry. Yuki refuses to believe it. Farah Village was a small settlement in the remote outback 200 years ago. After them, nothing could have been left behind in such a long time. But Rodelia says there is. Yuki is most impressed by this, and the princess herself is surprised. Rodelia says Grail was created for this purpose. According to the stories passed down, the company was born somewhere deep in the mountain. Yuki is even more surprised to hear this. There was a legend in the founder's village. Rodelia was silent for a moment, and she said about the legend that no matter how much time passes, they will always remain the people of their lord. Rodelia asked them to follow her if they want to hear more details. Iris confidently exclaimed, yes. Odette must wait here. Yuki would explain everything to her later. They went down. Rodelia held out her hand, holding the key. I turned it in the lock, and it clicked. The door creaked open. There was an artifact lying on the table. Rodelia asked them to sign it. This is an ancient artifact that is secretly passed down from generation to generation to generation to the head of the company. Most likely the original, Iris exclaimed. Yuki shares her surprise. This original ancient artifact is a precious treasure. But he is also interested in other things. How the guys from that village got it. Rodelia says that it doesn't have any special power. It can only accurately compare the registered handwriting and magic power with the signature left on. She hands the feather to Yuki. These are the transmitted instructions. His true signature and true magic power. Yuki understood. He walked over to the artifact, and he wrote on it. She began to cry and thought that the esteemed Yuki was her lord. She was embarrassed by her own tears. The inscriptions on the ancient artifact disappeared. Rodelia said it was a complete coincidence. They've all been waiting for this moment for 200 long years from the very beginning. Rodelia bowed. The position of the head of the company from generation to generation is usually occupied by the descendants of the founder. And in their families, words have been passed down to each new generation since ancient time. No matter how much time passes, they will always remain the people of their lord. who saved them from a deadly disease and sacrificed his life for their well-being. Tell us about what happened after the departure of Lord and Alice in time travel. Yuki stopped what was happening. He wants to digest the information in his head. Too many shocking facts have surfaced. Princess Iris is the reincarnation of Alice. The head of the trading company is a descendant of the Farah villagers. The villagers had been preparing for their reunion with Alice for hundreds of years. His head is spinning. He glanced at the princess, and I asked her if she was really Alice. Iris smiled sheepishly. She told her lord that it was true. He wonders if Alice was hurt. Iris looked at him quizzically. To be reborn, you must pierce your body with a holy sword. So he thought about if she was in pain at that moment. Iris thought about it. I tried to remember what it was like. She thinks it was painful, but this pain is incomparably small with the other. Her heart ached when she learned of my lord's death. Yuki didn't say anything, and I saw Rodelia smiling so happily. Yuki suddenly remembered. By the name of Cuffy, it turns out that she is a descendant of the village jeweler Gates Cuffy. Rodelia admires her lord's memory. This is her ancestor. Yuki doesn't forget his family, and he remembers that the guy was good at calculations. He passed on this knowledge to his descendants and put together such a huge trading company. Yuki admires me. He was a strong-bodied, quick-thinking child. To him, he was a smart and obedient son. Yuka is pleased to see such fruits of her efforts. He would like to see his achievements with his own eyes and praise him personally. Yuki asked if he could praise her instead of Gates. Rodelia was surprised. Rodelia didn't mind. Yuki asked again if he could pat her on the head. She gave Yuka permission. Yuki's hand reaches out to her, and he pats her on the head, calling her honey. She's great for saving Gates' company. Gates liked that best. He was an intelligent but very timid boy. Yuki remembers coming to cry when Lyle stole Remilia from him. Yuki suggests that we return to the main topic. He asks the princess if she remembers what happened after his death. These were Alice's last memories. Yuki turns to Rodelia to learn about the events after Alice used the holy sword. Rodelia is ready to carry out the Lord's orders. The conversation is likely to drag on. Yuki sat down, inviting the girls to sit down as well, which they did. Only Iris sat down next to Yuki, snuggling up to him, but it seems to him that she chose the wrong place. Iris tries to justify that she did it unintentionally. Yuki thought that she was beginning to show the influence of Alice's memories. Iris touched her face in horror. No wonder she liked to sit on his lap. Iris turned to Rodelia, who seemed to be familiar with the story from her ancestors. It was a true statement. Rodelia can only describe it in general terms, but her parents had told her about their lord since she was a child. Yuki isn't sure if this is accurate information. Any fairy tale in her family begins with the words, "Once upon a time there was a wonderful milord." And it always ended like this. In fact, all the people of the Cuffy family served the great milord. Rodelia talked about it and imagined her childhood. Yui would rather not be made into a fairy tale hero. Iris would love to hear these stories too. Yuki understands that this is all very well, but he would like to hear what happened after his death first. Iris is ready to share her memories. She gathered her thoughts, and she began to say that Alice had gone to bed after the Lord's death. These weren't the side effects of the deathmark ailment at all. After hearing that her father had killed her lord, she completely stopped eating. Yuki is angry at what she did. Iris understood his anger, and it was just. Back then, she didn't know that her lord had gone through the process of reincarnation. I thought he was dead, and I was going to follow him. She knew perfectly well that it wasn't her father's fault, and that in order to protect the village from the Holy Land Church, he had no other choice except to kill the Lord. That this is Nosferatu's own will. She knew it too. Still, her body wouldn't listen. It was as if her soul had already died, and only her body continued to function. In this state, she spent her days without him. The situation changed when Father was appointed a brave hero by the Holy Land Church, and as a reward for defeating her lord, he was granted a holy sword. After that, my father and mother started studying the holy sword. Lyle said Nosferatu said they'd see each other again. Lyle insisted that my lord never lied to them. If he said see you later, then there's a way to do it. So her father had told her. Remilia asked her daughter to help them with their research. And then, Perhaps one day she would be able to see their lord again. Lyle and Remilia turned to their daughter. She got out of bed, and she said that she would help them. She was finally able to take the first step. Following her lord's teachings, Alice ate little by little, chewing well and slow. And then, oatmeal. And as soon as her body recovered, she immediately began to help her parents with research. Thanks to my lord, she had blood that was close to mystical blood in her veins. This greatly helped them advance their research. At the same time, the parents successfully penetrated deep into the Holy Land Church to find other ways to see the Lord again and learn more about the Holy Sword. In the end, they finally managed to get the information they needed and uncover the secret of the Holy Sword. According to the records, the Holy Sword had the ability to bestow the effect of reincarnating a righteous soul. However, their research showed that at that time, there was only one charge left for reincarnation. This meant that she only had one chance to be reborn after her Lord for a reunion. Her father and mother asked her what she would do to be reunited with the Lord. Alice was ready for anything. Her parents were crying. After that, they allowed her to use the Holy Sword. Or rather, they had no choice, since they had already seen the state she was in before she found new hope. Iris remembered something and almost missed it. Her younger sister was safely born. Yuki was kind of worried about her. Then came the second wave of the epidemic of sick death marks, and her younger sister caught it. And so her rebirth was postponed as a matter of urgency. The younger sister's name was Mia. She was a very innocent and sweet girl. Iris tells us what happened after that. She used the Holy Sword and was safely reborn in this era. Now he's sitting in front of his lord. Yuki now found out what happened after his death. Iris kept talking. When her parents and Mr. Gates told her to look for the bat crest, she didn't know what it meant. And now, finally, everything fell into place. Rodelia turned to Yuki. She'd completely forgotten. His parents sent him messages. Literally, it will look something like this. Lyle got injured in Rodney's murder because of him. Now he has to take responsibility and take care of his daughter as his bride. Anyway, this stubborn daughter won't marry anyone but. Remilia had said that the Holy Land Church had put her lord through such suffering. She will not forgive them and destroy them. By the time her lord and their daughter were reborn, she wouldn't even leave a hint of those pigs behind. In his lifetime, he will grind them to powder. It won't leave a stone unturned. That's all Iris can tell you. And finally, she wants to say. She sees herself as Alice and is a little confused, and she wants to voice her sincere feeling. Her past life flashed before her eyes again. Alice thought she wouldn't see him. Never. She was sad. She was in pain. She pulled herself together. She decided she wanted to see him again. Meet again. Reunite. She was thinking of her lord. One day it will happen. Tears began to drip onto the floor. Yuki looked at her. Iris was sobbing. She missed him very much. She really missed him. Iris clung to Yuki. Yuki lowered his head sadly. He put his arm around her. Iris was hurt when he left her alone. He's a real fool. Iris was silent for a moment. She raised her head, and she said she missed him and was happy to see him again. Her lord was at her side. Lyle and Remilia were saying goodbye to their daughter. Lyle turned to the lord in his mind. He leaves Alice to it. Iris was hugging Yuki. Yuki asked her not to cry. She's a princess now. Iris kept telling him to back off. She's Alice now, that's all. Yuki said that Rodelia would laugh at her. Iris knows it won't happen. Rodelia sheds her own tears. She had only just heard proof of the truth of the story about her ancestor that had been told to her since childhood. Rodelia wants to continue the story passed down through generations. Since they have been transmitted for hundreds of years, there may be gaps. So she apologizes in advance. The day came when Alice left, and the fair villagers split into two groups. Yuki thought it was because of a disagreement. According to the transmitted words, the villagers were a very friendly people. They just split up for different purposes. To the property accumulation group, for the reincarnation of Milord and Al, and a group to infiltrate the Church of the Holy Land and destroy it from within. Yuki paused. I couldn't believe my ears. Their parents called their groups merchants and Zas. Gale had not built up this trading firm alone, but by working together with the villagers who had a talent for trading, so that when you meet the reborn Milord and Alice, you can take care of them. Yuki and Iris stared at her. Lyle and Remilia, along with other runners-up, penetrated the bowels of the Holy Land Church, and, feigning complete obedience, the ancient artifact that was in front of them also fell to her ancestors from their hands. Yuki had a question. Rodelia is ready to listen to him. The fact that Gale and a group of merchants started a firm, he can still understand. In the affairs of merchants, luck plays a significant role. If you can take her by the horns, you can easily succeed. However, with Saslansami it will not be so easy, and he doubts that they managed to get into their bowels so easily. Rodelia looked at him, and then she giggled. Yuki thought that he had said something wrong. Rodelia is glad that her lord is exactly as described in the legend. She turned to the princess. Iris said that her lord was completely unaware of his own improbability. Yuki had only just noticed. Iris was on his lap, and he wondered when she'd made it. Her lord had saved the village from the ailment of the death marks. My lord's achievements don't end there. Since they had settled in the village, not a single villager had died of starvation. They healed sick children with the help of purification. Thanks to this, child mortality was also reduced to a minimum. Thanks to the fact that he and his familiars eliminated all the dangerous monsters in the area, the villagers were not in any danger. Rather, it was them who attacked more. The villagers of Farah were given a stable and safe life, and they could die of old age surrounded by their family, passing on their knowledge to the next generation. Rodelia finished speaking. Yuki didn't understand why this can be considered incredible. Iris says that such villages are almost impossible to find. Yuki didn't believe it. Iris and Rodelia frowned at him. According to the legends, he shared all his knowledge. The results of magic research, farming methods with hunting, and useful tips for eliminating monsters. He can't say that he has mastered some knowledge in full until he can teach them to others. Moreover, the literacy rate of the villagers was 100%, when the literacy rate of the capital's population at that time did not exceed 30%. And such people continued to learn the high-class knowledge of the immortal sorcerer for 150 years. Rodelia notices the result. Two real geniuses were born, Lyle and Remilia. Yuki opened his eyes. Fair Village had raised a huge number of people far more outstanding than the Holy Land Church had, and her parents stood out even among these outstanding people, and offers to think about the question what will happen if ancient magic and ancient artifacts fall into the hands of such people. Lyle was a genius for perseverance, and Remilia was born with it. Yuki thought, according to Iris's words, the two of them had solved the secret of the Holy Sword in just a year. And if such geniuses are given access to complete knowledge about ancient magic and ancient artifacts, even scary to think about. In addition, Milord's death opened up a unique opportunity for them to enter deep into the Holy Land Church. Iris can't believe her mother and father would miss out on this opportunity. Yuki agrees with her. Rodelia doesn't mention the results of Lyle and the Zaslance group's introduction to the church that Yuki asked about. With the beginning of the war, communication with the Zaslancev group was lost. Since 200 years have passed, Lyle and Remilia could easily destroy the Holy Land Church. Moreover, the Temple of Elysium in Lyle itself did not see a threat. To the organization's priests, he was a hero who had slain an evil vampire lord. So they handed him the Holy Sword and gladly accepted him into their ranks. And in the back of such a defenseless enemy, Lyle and Remilia were stabbed with the knife of betrayal. The Holy Land Church didn't stand a chance. Perhaps they really were one of the reasons for the collapse of the church. Yuki thought that the two of them were too reckless. Then there was Alice, who had left them to be reborn, and he thought of Mia. He paid with his life for a peaceful resolution of the conflict, and they devalued this act. That's all Rodelia can say. She really would like to talk more about the establishment of a trading company, but she can't hold up the princess any longer. Odette is still waiting. Yuki will leave Rodelia one of his familiars. Since they have a castle and a bat on their coat of arms, the presence of such pets should not raise questions. He will update his familiars on the situation. Rodelia can use them to communicate with him. Rodelia bowed. Yuki looked at her in disbelief. They will give their full support to Yuki's every endeavor. If they need money or help with solving any inconveniences in their daily life, they can apply to them. Yuki will keep that in mind. He addressed the princess by her first name, and I remembered that there is everyone's position, public opinion, and human rules. And he said, "Your Highness." Yuki offers to leave one of his familiars to her as well. Iris agrees. She will make sure that there won't be any problem. He'll send one out later. Only he needs to know where Her Highness's room is. Iris thought about it. Then she turned sharply to Yuki. Yuki thought about it and probably remembered the exact same thing. Iris is confused and says that this is it. Alice used to talk when she was sick with the deathmark disease. When Alice mumbled something in a fever, and he just nodded to calm her down. To Iris, it seems that Yuki is deliberately avoiding specific words. Yuki asks about that promise where he will make her his bride when he grows up. Iris smiled sheepishly. She confirmed Yuki's words. He said she hadn't grown up yet. Iris thought that the past 200 years were not enough for him. But Yuki asks about the feelings of Princess Iris, if Alice is already clear enough for her. Iris stared intently at Yuki. She stammered out that she was a princess. She had already fallen in love with Yuki, who had saved her life twice. And I would like my lord to marry both Alice and Iris. Rodelia was shocked. I looked at Yuki, waiting for him to say something. He planned to protect Alice's descendant anyway. Yuki thought that there was no hurry for them just yet. Iris was embarrassed. He and Alice had just been reunited. He is now a 13-year-old boy, and there is no guarantee that a tender feeling will not arise. There's plenty of time. They won't rush things. But Iris will be able to get married after 15 years. And, in addition, all members of the royal family can only marry members of the royal families of other countries or aristocrats of their own kingdom. If they wish, their trading company is ready to put all their efforts into organizing the escape of their beloved ones. They will leave it as a last resort. If Yuki can find ancient artifacts, his status will automatically rise. Iris asks Yuki if he really wants to take her officially as his wife. But he can't give his current family any unnecessary trouble. It is unknown what will happen to my father and sister if they find out about Yuki's escape. And he decided to raise his status first. His glossary house had already earned the right to receive the title when it unleashed the Holy Sword. It remains to find 2 artifacts. If Lyle and Remilia demolished the church and initiated the loss of ancient artifacts, then these artifacts can be called their heritage. Yuki will find them all: Layla, Remilia, ancient artifacts, and Mia. If nothing happens, they'll fake an accident and disappear. Princess and Yuki will be traveling, and at one point, they will be attacked by a monster. Iris understood her lord. They can count on the company's support. Yuki smiled. They were talking about something. He hopes Odette isn't waiting too long for them. Rodelia calms him down. They made every effort to do so. Odette just loves sweets. Yuki thought that everything was fine. He was able to reunite with Alice's reincarnation and find the descendants of the fair villagers. Now, all he has to do is follow Lyle's trail with Remilia and collect artifacts. Yuki thinks what Lyle did. He needs to see for himself. Like Dean Nosferatu, guardian angel of the village of Feyre.